Ba-da-ba-ba-ba, ba-da-ba-ba. All right. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101. Promoter 101.
Greg Perloff, Another Planet Entertainment. I'm on Promoter 101.
Hello, it's Promoter 101, listeners, and this is Dan Steinberg. And I am giddy as a schoolgirl because it is big gets all week with the industry guests. And today we've got the biggest of the big. It's episode 189 of the Promoter 101 podcast. Filling you in with the details is my partner in crime, the one and only W. Luke Pierce.
Glad to be here and welcome listeners to the 198th episode of Promoter 101. This is a very special podcast, as Dan mentioned, as we are going to be joined by famed writer and music critic Bob Lefsetz of the Lefsetz Letter podcast, SiriusXM show, all those things. Bob will be joining us later on in the podcast. Tune in.
Plus, a war story with our very good friend from Senbla, Ollie Rosenblatt. I mean, Austin Powers and Carnage right here on Promoter 101.
Show me love, baby. Episode 198 of Promoter 101 starts right now.
Hey, this is Mark Geiger from WME, William Morris Endeavor Entertainment, coming to you on Dan Steinberg's podcast.
You've probably heard by now the podcast is coming to an end, but we're going to bring the last show to beautiful Music City, Nashville, Tennessee, just like we always wanted to.
It'll be our final interview, our last live podcast. We're going to be live from the International Entertainment Buyers Association Conference this year as one of the keynote sessions at the JW Marriott here in Music City, Nashville, Tennessee. Check out the full schedule at ieba.org, but we are on Sunday, October 27th at 2 p.m., and we are going to have one of the most influential executives in the touring game today, Deborah Rathwell, on that stage with us. She is the SVP of Global Touring at AG Presents, and we hope that you'll make it out. Passes are still available. Get registered at ieba.org. Check it out, and we hope to see you October 27th.
And if you get a chance, please pick up a brand new Promoter 101 t-shirt. All the money goes to Music Cares. $20 for the t-shirt, $50 for the hoodie. 100% of the gross donation goes to Music Cares. No additional shipping or handling. Plus, it's all tax deductible. What do you think about that, Luke?
Well, I think it's even better, Dan, because our friends at Prism are going to be matching the first $10,000 in donations to Music Care. So get on it right now. So if you take $20, buy yourself a lovely t-shirt, or $50 and you buy yourself a warm, soft hoodie, Prism will match that. And Dan, I have to say, the Prism folks have been so good to us and so good to our listeners who have supported this endeavor. Check out the folks that are helping us raise a lot of money, prism.fm.
And if you want to buy a t-shirt, go to promoter101.net/merch and check out our wares.
This is Marcia Vlasic, president of AGI Talent Agency, on Promoter 101.
Dan, we're celebrating some birthdays the week of October 29th to November 4th, 2019. Who are we wishing well wishes this week?
Tuesday, 10/29. Brandon Johnson in our Denver office, and Nederlander's own Mike Goldsmith. Good people, Mike Goldsmith. Good people.
Indeed he is. On Wednesday the 30th, let's wish a happy birthday to Gary Spivak.
Thursday, 10/31. That's Halloween.
Halloween.
These people's birthdays are on Halloween. Corey Brennan, Heather Wilton from the beautiful Portland 5, and from the Paps in Riverside in Milwaukee, Matt Berenger. Great people right there.
Turning the corner on Friday, the 1st of November, we're wishing a happy birthday to Tina Tribino.
On 11/2, that's Saturday, Ross Piper.
On Sunday the 3rd, wishing a happy birthday to Matt Chin, Chad Guy, Mark Solheim, Gino Shelton.
Monday, 10/4, Christian Wolf and John Bell.
Wishing everybody this week happy birthdays from the gang here at Promoter 101.
Hey, this is Bill Silva from Bill Silva Entertainment. You are listening to Promoter 101.
Promoter 101 with an exclusive breaking announcement. Homeward Bound is doing an amazing benefit in Los Angeles at the Wiltern, and here to give us all the details about the great show that's going to happen January 23rd, the incomparable Jonathan Shank from Redlight. Jonathan, welcome to the fucking podcast.
Hey. Thank you so much for having me, Steiny.
Well, when you got great, amazing news of you doing such great things for great people, we got to spread the word. So tell us all about it. Who do you got that's playing? What's happening? Tell us about the benefit. I can't wait to hear about this, John.
Oh, man. Well, super exciting, and producing the first Homeward Bound concert at the Wiltern, January 23rd during Grammy Week, benefiting the homeless community, and specifically PATH, which is a California-based organization. PATH stands for People Assisting the Homeless. And obviously, the homeless epidemic has really spread in our country, and it's something that's been really important to me, and been amazing to see our industry rally around this cause. And it's the first benefit of this kind to benefit the homeless community.
So it's an amazing event. Pre-sale tickets at Ticketmaster on November 5th. On sale to the public on November 8th. It's a great cause. Can you give us a taste of who's going to be performing?
I'll give you a little teaser. We're so grateful to all of these amazing artists for donating their time and supporting this amazing cause. Jason Mraz, Philip Phillips, Scary Pool Party, Fits in the Tantrums, and many, many more.
That within itself could basically be a forum, like a sold-out forum. That's a great fucking show. When you get these cool benefit shows, usually there's a special vibe. The act is doing something special you don't normally see him doing. You got a bunch of acts. I'm guessing they're not doing all full sets. So what's going to be the vibe?
Yeah, I was really inspired by Neil Young's Bridge School benefit, and had attended a bunch of those over the years. And all of the artists are going to be coming in and doing acoustic stripped-down mini sets. So it should be a really special, unique evening, and everybody's going to be performing a handful of songs in a really cool, intimate, stripped-down environment.
Such a great lineup. Is the bill completely full? If one of the managers or agents or artists that are out there listening is just dying to help out with this cause they believe in, is it too late to get involved?
If there are any other artists or any other managers or agents or other people listening and their artists are passionate about this cause, feel free to reach out. We'd love to welcome them to the event.
And if they want to reach out to you and say, hey, I am Dave Matthews and I want to play that set, what's the email address that an artist like that would reach at?
I'm at jonathan@redlightmanagement.com.
Awesome. Well, that should be easy because I bet he knows how to find Redlight.
Hopefully he's got the security code.
Get to Los Angeles, January 23rd at the beautiful Wiltern. Thank you, Shank, for coming on Promoter 101, and thank you for the great work you're doing for this great cause.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you there, Steiny. Really appreciate you.
Mark Campana. I'm with Live Nation Concerts, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Promoter 101 Flashbacks.
Episode 22.
Andrea Johnson.
Everything that can tour is touring, and as a promoter, I'm sure that you see that. Just the volume is astronomical. And for the most part, I'm interested in developing projects that aren't already out there. I'm interested in what comes next. What's the next thing that's going to blow up? And I'm not talking about like the next little baby band, although maybe to a degree. But, for example, I'm starting to get into podcasting, me and everyone else. I started working with Stephen Dubner, who of Freakonomics fame, who has a new podcast called Tell Me Something I Don't Know, which is a game show style podcast, and going out there and just kind of testing the waters and seeing what kind of response we're getting with that, which has been really gratifying, and just kind of seeing where there are holes in the market that we can develop projects that are really compelling for everyone involved.
Live touring podcasts.
Yeah, well, this is not a new concept, obviously, but, podcasting is still a pretty under-the-radar thing. Most people do not know about podcasts, but I think that's starting to change.
Definitely. Okay, so you're diversifying. You're trying not to dip your foot in the exact same pond every time you route an act through the same market.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, I've got my kind of niche, which is that performing arts center, kind of 1 foot in the fine arts, 1 foot in the commercial music industry, with clients like obviously Straight and with 2 cellos and the piano guys. We definitely avail ourselves of both the fine arts world and the commercial music industry, but also looking for non-music projects, as I was just talking about.
Okay, and when you get involved with something that's a new act, what's the process for you from going to discovering an act and deciding you take in the meeting and deciding you want to sign something? How does that work for you?
Well, and this is going to sound silly, but I really do have to think about how I'm going to sell it. If I can't be on the phone with someone like you and convince you, then how am I going to convince anyone else?
Hey, this is Brian O'Connell with Live Nation, and we are on Promoter 101.
So, Dan, as Promoter 101 comes to a close, we've been reminded of a lot of stories about some of our favorite music experiences through the years. And you and I were talking recently about one of your first visits to a concert with your father, seeing Phil Collins, nonetheless. You want to share that with us?
You know, my love for live music comes from my father. He was a drummer when he was a kid and huge Beatle fan, and he used to take me to some of the best shows early on in life. And I never had a problem, nor my sister, of going to my dad and saying, this concert's coming to town. Can you take me to see Motley Crue at McNichols Sports Arena? Can you take me to see Gallagher, Dad? And he was super cool. George Carlin. I saw all the greats when I was young because my dad was always up for it. So coming into the end of the 80s and the early 90s, I asked my dad if he would take me to McNichols to see Phil Collins on his solo headline tour. And being the awesome music fan and great dad that he was, he obliged. We got our seats. We were in a sold-out sports arena on a Monday night on a school night. And 13-year-old Dan looks up to his dad as the lights go down. And we both at the same moment realize we are at a couples concert, father and son, maybe the only in the building, having an awkward moment of, this is weird. But we both shrugged it off and had a great night. But yeah, that was one of those moments me and my dad shared where we loved our music so much that maybe we didn't put together. Phil Collins is kind of a date show for couples, maybe not a father and son show. What are you going to do?
Just another story in those awkward teenage years, Dan.
It was awkward, but now lovingly think back on it as one of the best nights I had with my dad.
Well, coming off that story, let's tell a slightly different story. We're going to be joined now by my friend and yours, all the way from the UK, fresh off his Sony Masterworks acquisition. Joining us now for a war story, Senbla's Ollie Rosenblatt.
I'm hanging out with Ollie Rosenblatt from Senbla, and I got to tell you work with so many great artists.
Thank you.
But one of them special, above the rest. You get to work with Burt Bacharach.
I do.
He is a rich man's Barry Manilow.
He is one of the finest ever songwriters of the 21st century.
What is it like to know and work with Burt Bacharach? You got a story?
Yeah, I mean, it's a privilege. You know, when you work with people like that, it really is a privilege to work that closely with them and be that involved in their shows in the UK.
I mean, the word icon doesn't have enough oomph. I mean, he's like up there with Aretha Franklin.
Totally. Well, he Say a Little Prayer, he wrote and she covered. That was one of her major songs. And all these songs, people would go, oh, God, I know that song. Oh, my God. And it's all Burt Bacharach. And his show is 2.5 hours long, and it's basically just hit after hit after hit in medley format because there's so many hits that he can't fit it in.
The guy has so many A's, he never got to the B's. There are no deep cuts.
There are no B's.
Just that good.
It's amazing. I take it very seriously working with him because it really is an honor and a privilege to work with people like that. It's very special. When I look back at my career in a few years, many years' time, I think it will still be a real highlight of mine to having worked with him and having experienced so many fun times with him.
You got a story?
Yeah, I got a story actually from the first time I went to his house in LA, and his manager took me through and said, hey, Bert's in here, and his music room's there, and he's actually at his piano in another room. I walked into his house. I'm going, I'm in Bert's house. Oh my God, and this is incredible. I walk into the room where he's sat with his back to us as we're at the door, and he's playing the piano. And I get into the room, and I look to my left, and all of his Oscars, his Gershwin Music Prize, his Grammys, every award you can imagine under the sun is right there on the left-hand side. And there's Bert in front of me with his back to us, playing the piano, and he's actually writing a song as we're standing in the doorway of his house.
Was it Patch the Duchy on the left-hand side?
Yeah, his reggae. And he's there, and he's humming a tune out, and he's playing a few chords, and he's playing a medley, and he's changing it. And I just thought, here I am in this amazing man and performer and songwriter's house, now actually just watching him in his element writing a song, and he doesn't know we're there. And it was a real kind of private moment that you very rarely get an insight into someone of that stature, or anyone that's a songwriter, get into an insight into how they write, how they work. And it was an amazing memory, a moment for me to just stand there and watch this person do what he's done for the best part of 65 years, having written the most incredible catalogue of songs, like he's doing right there as I'm watching him, with that same process. And it was quite a moment.
That pure form of being an artist.
Yeah, writing and working out the way the melody should go, the way the chord structure should go, everything. Everything we take for granted when we listen to a song, but especially when you're watching someone as great as him.
I would imagine that's the stuff he'd want you to take for granted.
Totally.
When you go to a show, you don't want people thinking about all the work you put on to make that happen. You want them to relax and be entertained, right?
Exactly.
So
that's, I think, one of the best parts of our job, actually.
Yeah.
Is seeing an audience come to a show that you've put on and you've helped be a real part of make happen. And for 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever long it is, they forget about everything else in their world and they're there enjoying your show. And they come away with something, hopefully feeling a bit more enriched, and it could potentially be a memory they have for life. And that's a beautiful thing.
Ollie, I can't thank you enough. Before I let you go, can you give me a show me love?
Show me love, baby. Come on. You know it, baby.
It's really cool to have Ollie here, and particularly as one of the last podcasts, War Stories. I want to take a moment and point out the roundtable of our industry. I'm good friends with Rich Mills, who at one point I introduced to David Britz. David Britz had introduced to Luke. Luke had introduced me to Ollie. Ollie had been introduced to Luke through David Britz. So it was this very awesome social circle, one introduction to another, which wouldn't have happened if everybody wasn't so great about introducing people to everyone else. And now everybody's just part of this big social wheel. It's kind of fun.
I will never forget the first time that I met Ollie Rosenblatt, which is when we were in the tech space work offices in 1100 Glendon in LA, and Rich Mills had set up a blind date meeting for Ollie, who was here in town, or here in LA at the time, visiting agents. And in walks, in the middle of LA, in an office that typically was packed with people wearing jeans, t-shirts, and flip-flops, a man dressed head to toe with an ascot on, saying things like darling and hello baby, and it was just something out of a different time. And his personality and character is so endearing, and I'm so glad to be able to call that guy a friend, and so proud of what he's done in building and selling Senbla now.
The first time I met Ollie was at a bowling alley in London, which is a blind date you set up, and Ollie walks in, and I was like, should we bowl a game? He's like, no, that's a peasant sport here in London, baby. We should just have some drinks, and the wings are delicious here. Nobody bowls here. And went on to have one of the best nights of my life with Ollie, and turned out to become very close friends. But what an amazing guy. If you get a chance, look him up. Ollie Rosenblatt, right here on Promoter 101.
My name's Tom Windish, and I'm on Promoter 101.
Dan, it's Monday, so that means there's a brand new Promoter 101 Badass of the Week. Who is it this week?
Well, come to the end of Promoter 101. There's only so many left, and you just want to make sure they're going out to very special people. And I got to say, there's very few people that I hold in high regard on the level of this week's Badass of the Week. Going out to Vector Management's Brian Penix, a great manager and an amazing bro. This week's Badass of the Week.
I completely back this week's selection for Promoter 101 Badass of the Week. Brian Penix, what a guy. First as a promoter and now full-time as a manager looking after Tommy Emmanuel, Andy McKee, Jerry Douglas, so many of the greats.
We are thrilled to announce that Promoter 101 has teamed up with the Recording Academy's Music Cares Foundation to do a little good. And you, our beloved listeners, can help. By going to Promoter101.net and clicking the merch tab at the top of the page, you can pick up a stylish, limited edition Promoter 101 Call Ya Mother t-shirt or hoodie in a huge variety of styles and colors. 100% of proceeds goes directly to Music Cares and their mission to provide a safety net of critical assistance for music people in their time of need. Shipping and handling is absolutely free, and for the first $10,000 we raise, our good friends at Prism are matching donations dollar for dollar. Go to Promoter101.net right now, click on the merch tab, pick out one of our awesome shirts, and be the heart and soul of the music community by donating to Music Cares. And don't forget to call your mother. Established in 2016, Promoter 101 and its illustrious founding fathers, Sir Daniel Steiny Steinberg and the one and only W. Lucas Pierce, have fermented like the finest of wines. And after almost 3 years of bringing you only the most exquisite, educational, and thought-provoking interviews, it is with great pleasure that we bestow unto you the Promoter 101 Masterclass Sessions.
Masterclass.
Dan, I am very excited about our featured interview this week as we are joined now by famed writer, critic, publisher of the Lefsetz Letter, Bob Lefsetz podcast, available on SiriusXM. Joining us now on this, the 198th episode of Promoter 101. Please welcome Bob Lefsetz.
We are in beautiful Los Angeles, and I'm hanging out with the business icon, Bob Lefsetz. Welcome to my podcast.
Great to be here, Steiny.
Get to turn the tables a little bit. Someone that's always interviewing everybody else, host your own podcast.
You know, I like to get people's stories, but people rarely ask me about myself. So this is a treat.
Well, I've known you, God, it's going on 20 years at least.
Yeah, exactly.
And throughout that time, I've gotten to see many different sides of you in the business. I've gotten to see what people see publicly.
Right.
And I've gotten to see a very intimate side of you when you're paying attention and really interested in things. And I've gotten to see the annoyed side of you when you don't want to deal with anybody because it's too much. And the mixture of what's real and what's not is an industry polarizing thing. People like to talk about you.
Well, I'm in the eye of the hurricane. You know, unless I go out, whatever, I never hear about it. This happened just the other night. People are talking about. I don't know. I'm sitting in front of a computer. Obviously, I'm out a lot at dinners and shows, whatever. But I am out of the conversation, generally speaking.
So it's news to you that you're someone that's talked about more in the industry than most?
You know, I wouldn't be a writer if I wasn't self-conscious to a degree. And when I write, I mostly write just pure inspiration. Like I'll read an article or something will touch me off and I have to get to the computer right then and I'll channel it. And when I do that, I'm not self-conscious. However, in this, just digress a little bit, in this era, you know, with all the trolls, certain things you can say are just people just going to beat you up. Forget reasonable people. People have an agenda to beat you up. But when I'm done writing and I'm living my regular life, it's hard for me to view wherever I am. Like I was at a dinner last night and a lot of people are comfortable with their status. I have a little social anxiety. Not that I can't go out and do things, but thinking about where I am in the marketplace, et cetera, specifically is something that's probably makes me too anxious.
Okay, so let's go back. Let's do some history.
Okay.
Obviously educated. You're an East Coast guy.
Yes, I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in Connecticut, Fairfield, Connecticut. At the time, no one would commute to New York from Fairfield. Now you can't even get a parking space at the railroad station. My mother still lives in that area. It was all New York media. So it's New York television, New York radio, etc. You're totally within those boundaries. Once you get to New Haven or Hartford, it's different, but we were only 50 miles from New York City. I went to college at Middlebury College in Vermont. I could have gone other places, but I really wanted to go there because it was co-ed, beautiful, and the college had its own ski area, and I was a big skier. In retrospect, at this era, the country was in turmoil, and it was very conservative where I went to college. I mean, times have changed, but also I went in the dark era. You know, there was only one snowy TV station, college radio station. I mean, there really wasn't much. But 45% of the people were prep school students, which, you know, growing up as a middle-class Jew going to a public school, I had never encountered. And that was a lesson that served me well in coming times.
As an East Coast Jew, have you found, because I notice I have, the further west you come, the less Jewish the population seems to be and the less hardcore they are about that?
I'm not sure whether it's east, west, or time. I was a ski bum in Utah for a couple of years. Within 2 weeks, every Jew in Utah found me. And it was a very tight community. I was working at the ski area, you know, living...
How many Jews in Utah would there be?
Well, how many Jews would there be? 13.
So it was enough.
Yeah, exactly.
You could have a Seder.
No, but at the time, the big real estate, the new mall was called Trolley Square. And I guess I met the guy who owned that, and people had said, you know, it was just a very tight community. When I went to college, there were very few Jews compared to growing up in the suburbs. When I went to a melting, you know, Fairfield is not a low rent community. There's two halves. One half, we didn't even know those people. They went to a different high school or they went to prep school. My school was a melting pot school. And so there were some people who lived in projects, but generally speaking, you know, middle class. You know, a lot of people say, oh, I went to high school with this person. I went to high school with that person. The only person, 2 people went to my high school of memory. What was her name? Linda Kozlowski, who ended up being in the Crocodile Dundee movies and marrying Paul, and John Mayer. So when John Mayer hit, I mean, I certainly knew who he was based on people hyping me before, but, his song was, I'm running through the halls of my high school, and I know Mayer a fraction. But I remember I'm sitting with the studio with him and Don Was, and I say, I went to Andrew Ward, which is the same high school, but that didn't get a big rise out of him.
Obviously, you guys went to school at different times.
Absolutely. But I'm trying to say, a lot of people say, especially in L.A., I went to school with this one and that one. No, that's not the kind of people I went to.
Just wasn't part of the world that you came from.
But a couple of other things. When I went to college, I was the guy with all the records. I taught actually a winter term course. When I went to college, it was 414. And in January, you took one course every day that was totally different. And a couple of people did this. I said, I want to teach a course on rock music, and people took it for full credit. I mean, it was a whole thing. But I was the oddball. I moved to L.A. There are people just like me. They went to UCLA. They went to shows. It's just hilarious.
What 414? What does that mean?
Okay. Where I went to college, a course is a course is a course. This is Middlebury College in Vermont. And very different. Most people go to schools where it's about hours. You need X number of hours, which each X number of credits. To make it simple, if you took an English class, which was 3 hours, it has as much credit as somebody who took a science class that went 3 hours and then had like a 5-hour lab. So you took 4 courses from September to December and 4 courses from February to May. But in January, for 4.5 weeks, they had completely different courses, and you took one of those.
So it was like an alternative elective to just kind of clear the
palate. Yeah, exactly. Now they call it J-term. It was called winter term when I was there, but same deal.
Sounds very creative.
Well, you talk about creative. I woke up in my junior year and said, I got to get out of here. But I ultimately did not get out of Middlebury College because to go anywhere else, I would have to go 2 years, which means I would have to go at least 1 or 2 more semesters, which was never going to happen. But in my research about where I might go, I saw people say, Colorado College, where our good friend Don Strasberg went. What appealed to me about Colorado College was you only took 1 course at one time. And you didn't have to juggle anything. That sounds like something good for me.
Yeah, at the same time, you just got to be all-encompassing. The amount of reading that's involved with doing that much ground coverage in a course is insane.
That's true. But if you go to a place like Middlebury College, where there's no grade inflation, and it rarely does anyone get an A, you're reading all the time. And I remember I went to law school. Law school was a cakewalk comparing to go to Middlebury. I could go on and on about this, but I'm not sure this is what you want to hear about.
Wait a minute. Law school's a cakewalk for you?
Yeah. I went to law school because I'd lived 2 years in Utah. As I say, my dream at the time when I graduated from college, although it was kind of beaten out of me, but maybe in the middle of college, well, I either want to move to San Francisco or work for Rolling Stone or move to like somewhere to be a ski bum. Well, because of something that happened in college, I certainly wasn't going to go work for Rolling Stone. We can get into that in a minute. And I went to Utah because the first year I was at Middlebury, incredible snow year. And then the years kept getting worse. Now they have snowmaking. They didn't have it back then. And the last year I was here, I mean, I can ski on anything, but you need some snow. So I went to Salt Lake City because Alta and Snowbird, where I went, have the most guaranteed snow of any place in America. What I did not know when I went there was that that's the epicenter of freestyle skiing it was at the time. And I got caught up in that circuit, and I skied with all those people. And the next year, what I didn't realize, because I ski with these people all the time, okay, world champion, whatever. When the competition came, I froze where they were great. And I realized it's going to take me like 2 or 3 years to learn how not to freeze. Then I got the world's worst case of mononucleosis. And my father always said, I'll pay for law school. It's a good background. So I started going to law school, and it was really sucked. And I really was thinking about dropping out. So I called my friends in Utah. They said, because I was going to go for Christmas, said, don't come. The funny thing is I always tell people 76, 77 was the worst year of snow in the Western business. No one really believed me. And then 2011, 2012, it happened again. And they referenced 76 and 77. So although I went at the end of the year to ski some, and I saw bare spots, which you would never see at Snowbird, I also got involved in a relationship. That carried me through law school. The way law school works is, well, let me put it a different way. Richard Nixon said the only thing you need to get through law school is a lead butt. In terms of analyzing the case, this is what we did in Middlebury. I remember took an anthropology course my first semester, which I shouldn't have taken. I went to college because you're supposed to, okay, not because I wanted to. And I remember sitting with my mother and sister saying, you should take this course. The teacher was good, this guy, Edwards. But at the very first class, he said, we're never going to discuss the reading in class. If you can't read the books, you shouldn't be here. You got a bigger problem. So if I read the thing in law school, I knew it was understanding. I didn't have to wait for somebody to analyze it. And the other thing is, before you graduate, before you take the bar exam, you take these bar review courses. I am completely convinced you could not go to law school and just take the bar review course and pass the bar. And I took the bar review course very seriously, and I took the bar in July. You don't find out until November, and I passed.
Okay, so you passed. Law school wasn't difficult for you, but did you practice law?
For about 10 minutes. I mean, I never wanted to practice law. Always wanted to be in the music business. As I said, my father was a real estate appraiser. Before that, he owned a liquor store. It's not like we knew anybody in show business. Okay. And at the time, which is not the case right now, all the record companies were run by lawyers. And I said, go to law school. This would be good. So since you have to wait so long for your bar results, I got a job with a lawyer, a sole practitioner, waiting for my bar results. And in his particular case, he had some really good clients at the time. And I did the work. I really didn't like doing the work. The work was, not interesting to me. And I realized when I was there, I said, I get it. I would rather call my own lawyer and tell them to do the work. So I quit after, 6 months, whatever, tried to be a music manager, starved. He was always calling me to come back, and I said no, but he got in a very big client called Canon Films. They were the biggest independent film company of the 80s, and they made a lot of movies, and we did the legal work for them until I got a job with this movie producer and moved on. I mean, I didn't work for him again that long, probably 4 months.
Was that more entertaining to you because it was entertainment?
It was always entertainment law. And as a lawyer, I don't think I should reveal the clients, but he was mostly in the movie business. I was the only guy in the movie business who wanted to be in the music business. It was always the reverse.
Right, because the money's much better on the film side.
Well, I got a lot of thoughts about that, but that's what I wanted to do. So, yes, he had a lot of movie clients. In addition, he represented some people who were on a very big record. And in this particular case, there had been a big issue with the record company and the law, whatever. So there were a lot of issues, and I was involved in that. The other thing, there'd be licensing music for movies. Did a lot of that.
You made it all the way through law school. You passed the bar.
Right.
You're practicing it, and the entire time you're not interested in it.
I didn't care about law school going. I mean, I'd lived in Utah. Unlike many ski areas, Alton Snowbird, there's like almost nowhere to live there. Okay. And I'd lined up a job, if you want to get really deep, at the Gold Miner's Daughter, which is the closest lodge to the lift. That's one of the few places where Middlebury College has cred. But before the season started, I broke my leg. Okay. What happens is I line up that job, but the job doesn't start till November 15th. I come to L.A. My sister's living in L.A., although I wanted to be in L.A. I convinced her to go to grad school in L.A., and I get a job at a sporting goods store, Star Sporting Goods Store, which was on Highland Avenue right next to Hollywood High. It was the really big place. It got torn down. There was going to be some redevelopment, but it never happened. It was a full-service sporting goods store. I worked in the ski department. And, stars would come in. But I didn't know in L.A., you're too cool. You don't talk to the stars. But when Jack Nicholson came and said, I got to go talk to Jack Nicholson. This was just before One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And we're having a big conversation. He's there with his driver about driving, whatever. And then I saw his skis, and they used to have these little blurbs in Time magazine like 2 months later. But I broke my leg in L.A. in a freak accident in that there was a very early snowstorm. There are these ski areas at high altitude surrounding L.A., even though people think of L.A. as a sun place. I was with this guy. We had a ragtag bunch of people were, working at a ski shop, and literally the car burned up on the way up the hill. And I had 2 pairs of skis, and one of my pairs of skis was very long. This was like November 5th. And I said, what are the odds someone's going to have a ski rack? I should take the shorter pair of skis that I took from the shop. But the shorter pair of skis, which I did take, the bindings wouldn't hold. And I was on a jump, and I was about 10 feet in the air, and one of the skis came off. So I landed with one of my feet in the snow and the other ski still going, which twisted me. I knew there was a problem. And the interesting thing was there was so little snow, they had to carry me in the toboggan over dirt. But I had a broken leg. That's like November 7th. But by the time you hit like January 10th, because you have to wear the cast for 6 weeks, I went to Utah, ended up living with some people who I'd found out about at the foot of the canyon, and then ultimately getting a job at Snowbird selling hot dogs. There's a place still there. It's called the Bird Feeder. Used to be the only place to get food right on the plaza where the tram is. This will be clear to people who've been there. And at the time, Utah had a law how much butterfat you had to have in the ice cream. And therefore, the ice cream was incredible. And I curried favor with the freestyle skiers by giving them huge ice cream cones. That's how I knew they knew who I was. So I went to law school because you're there long enough and you see the game, okay? You can become a ski instructor, which I would never want to do because I'm there to ski. I don't want to compromise myself. Ski patrol is very serious there with avalanches. It's like a science. I'm interested. I'm not that interested. So what happens is people stay there and they stop skiing and they get a straight job. I said, I don't want to do that. And I got this world's worst case of mononucleosis. So going to law school was my out because I was at rock bottom.
Okay, so it gave you a minute to figure out what you were going to do.
No, I'm not that kind of person. I'm not a big planner. I'm a dreamer, but not a planner. Said, okay, I didn't have any money. My father said he would pay for it. What the fuck are my options?
So it was something to do with the moment.
Exactly.
Go back to Rolling Stone for a second in college. What happened there?
Okay. Things have changed now because of the internet. I didn't buy my first issue of Rolling Stone till the fall of 1969, where I was going for an interview at Columbia. And the funny thing with the guy I had the interview with, we talked about magazines and movies, whatever, and I got in. And I was thinking of going there, but a guy I knew from a college program, a summer program, said he wanted a room with me. And I said, I don't want to do that. How am I going to get out of this? But in reality, Middlebury had been my first choice. And many a time I think I should have gone to Columbia, but I say, in college, what did I learn? Okay, what did I do? I skied a lot. I still ski. I guess I went to the right place. So when I was a freshman in college, everybody had to take this English course. And this is the only time I ever did this. And we were assigned a paper, and I called the professor on a Sunday because everybody lives in a small town. I said, can I do something creative? And I think the book was called Felix Krull, The Confidence Man, or maybe, I don't know. So I wrote a paper called Consolidated Stuffed Nose, or That's the Way the Joint Rolls. And, you're there in class before the teacher comes. All the prep school people say, you're going to flunk. You're going to flunk. I got an A when no one would get an A. And I went to the payphone because at this time we didn't have phones in our room. I ultimately got one. And I called my mother and said, I'm going to be a writer. And she laughed. Okay, the way the schedule, you go to a small college, it's slightly bigger now. When I went there, 1,800 people. Now there's 2,500 people. And, it was literally like living with your family, which wasn't good for exploring relationships and a lot of things people do in big city or big campus schools. But there was one writing teacher, John Claggett, who famously wrote Sea Stories. So when I'm a sophomore, I go to that class. Whenever I read my stuff, it's like springtime for Hitler, okay? People's jaws drop and say, huh? And then I remember, this is spring of 1972. I was a dedicated reader of Rolling Stone, as I say. I bought my first issue in the fall of 1969, and then I immediately got a subscription. That's when you got free records.
You mean when you were writing for a paper?
No. When you subscribed to Rolling Stone, you got free albums. And when I subscribed, I got Volunteers and The Worst of the Jefferson Airplane.
Kind of like when you opened a bank account back in the 70s, they give you a toaster.
Exactly.
It's your signing bonus?
Exactly. Everybody got it. It was on the back page. That was still when you folded Rolling Stone over. But the cool thing about it, when I went to college, and some of these junior advisors, they used to freak out. I would study Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday all day, and hopefully not Wednesday. And then I would take a full day to read Rolling Stone. I literally read every word. So in Rolling Stone, there was a review of Alice Cooper's Killer. You may or may not know, but the first two Alice Cooper records were on Frank Zappa's label Straight. Maybe it was Bizarre. He had two labels, and they were seen kind of as jokes. And ultimately, there was a review by Lester Bangs where they'd put a line completely around the review saying, this is serious, going on and on how great Alice Cooper's Killer was.
Which is high praise because Lester Bangs is Lester Bangs.
Well, at that point, Lester Bangs has been made a legend because he died in the Cameron Crowe movie. At this time, he was known as one of the rock critics, okay? But the year before, Rolling Stone had done a joke called The Great White Wonder about this festival after Woodstock where, Bob Dylan, everybody was there, and it turned out to be a joke. So I read this review of Alice Cooper Killer. I said, this must be a joke, but I will buy the album just to see, because this is the year you had to buy to hear, and they're not playing Alice Cooper on the radio. And you drop the needle on Killer, and a song called Under My Wheels. I was like, and then the track takes off. And I said, wow. Also, the opening act, when I went to the show in Boston, was Blue Oyster Cult, which I loved. Cities on Flame with rock and roll. So I went to that show. Boston was not that close. We didn't go that often. It was like 5 or 6 hours, but I wanted to see the show. And I came back and I wrote about it. And Claggett says, well, you finally wrote something good, but it needed a twist. And I said to myself, a twist? This is 1972. You ever hear of the new journalism, which is already old, a twist? I said, I'm done. And I never wrote another word in college.
You were always a reader, I assume?
From day one. I remember being in the back of the station wagon. My mother was from Peabody, Mass., which is right outside Boston. We go to visit her parents, and I'd be in the back of the station wagon reading these books. And then we had the Arrow Book Club. I would order 5 or 6 books at a time, more than anybody. I love to read. I'm reading all day now. A lot of people sit on the phone. No, I essentially never talk on the phone. I won't say literally never, because most phone conversations, unless it's I'll tell you my favorite story on this. For people who may or may not remember, Peter Grosslight had this illness, which is not the one he died of. He died of a cancer, and they could not diagnose it, okay? And he was having all these treatments, and he said to Ari, who was running WME, listen, your brother Ram works for Obama. Can he get my condition studied by the National Institute of Health? So Ari set it up. Peter called. Ram picked up the phone and said, what do you need? Just like that, which I love. Whereas most people today, especially they're not calling just to be my friend. They have an ask. But first you have to talk about what you did that weekend, what's going on in life, and then they get to the ask, which you don't want to provide. So it's like, no, yeah, get me an email all day long. Don't call me on the phone.
Which is funny. As long as I've known you, I don't know that we've ever spoken on the phone, but we probably interact once every 2-3 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, literally, I speak to no one on the phone. And it's the only thing is now it's evolved where everybody, does things in email. A lot of old agents are pissed and managers that people don't talk on the phone. I hear this all the time. The younger generation, they're just emailing when you just pick up the phone.
Yeah, there's a big industry hang up with this is learning how to service people the way they want to be serviced, opposed to the way you want to service them. Because the customer's always right. You got to service them the way they want to be serviced. And that's important.
So in your life, what's the balance between email and phone?
It's a good 70-30 email, but it's all about, usually the details get done in the email and then the finalization gets done on the phone. But the older school guys that I work with love the phone.
Right. And
I can do an entire tour in email with the younger guys. So I'd send smoke signals if it brought business in. So you mix it up, but I'm there to service my acts, my managers, my agents. And
when I used to laugh about it, this is already 15 years ago, you'd fly around the world to see people you never met that you never talked to. You had an email, like I'm going to Australia in like 6 weeks. And actually they did want to speak on the phone, which I dreaded. Just because, we talk in business, we're friendly, you're in Australia, blah, 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 blah. But as I say, I've flown all kinds of places where I don't know the people. It's just set up. Okay, here's what you're doing. You go.
Yeah, but traveling and meeting people in person and having that connection changes things. Like an email address doesn't stand out, but once you put a face to that email address or a phone number, you've had a glass of wine or a beer with them, it changes everything.
Well, that is 100% true. I remember I ended up working for Sanctuary Music. These guys still manage Iron Maiden. And Rod Smallwood said he'd gotten drunk with every Capital Promotion person around the world. And I'm sure that's, helped Iron Maiden. Now, I couldn't agree more that being in person totally changes the relationship. I also have a theory, which is always right. The people who send the longest emails are the worst in person. The people who send the briefest emails, they're great in person. They talk whatever.
Suddenly feeling very good about the length of my emails.
No, you don't know. I'm talking about length relatively. These people will send like a 10-paragraph letter, like it's a book. And then you see it typed on my iPhone. And I said, how the fuck did they type that? It's like really crazy. But the one thing I could never figure out, because I don't know, is if you're an agent, you're a promoter, it's a little bit different. But if you're an agent, when do you decide to go to the show or not? If the show's out of town. If the show's in town, you should cover it. But maybe you go to the first gig. I mean, how do you know?
I think it's probably different for each of them, but some agents, it seems like they like to cover the worst day of the tour, so they're there, not hiding from problems. I kind of like those guys, the guys that are like, this is the problem day of the tour, I'm going to be there. I'm going to be in the trenches with you. I like those guys. Obviously, if there's something bigger, it seems like the video shoot or something, they also up for that.
But I do know an act, household name act, who fired his manager because the manager, even if he was in town, wouldn't go to the gigs.
It's a different day. I interact less with acts than I ever have.
Really?
And it seems like a safer place to be now. Seems like getting too close to the act can only lead to trouble. The manager and the agent know them as good as I can, but staying as far away from the act and getting in there.
Okay, but there are all these stories of promoters like Donald K. Donald in Toronto. His health is not great now, but if you sit with him, he can regale you all night with crazy stories about his interactions with the acts. Is it just a different time or the act's different?
I think it's a super different time. And, to that end, DKD lost Celine Dion to AEG. They were super close. They did the world, but at some point, something changed. And I think the something is the business changed. And John Meglin does business differently than DKD did.
Well, I don't think, and Donald is great, and I don't know, but talking out of my ass, I don't think, they were willing to pony up that much money and do a worldwide thing, but I don't know the details there.
Well, they were dominant promoter in Canada, and obviously things changed. They were a worldwide producer of shows for a while. Like, his story is incredible, but things have changed. The way the business works has changed. I think the interaction between bands and artists and managers evolved just like anything else. But I think there's a line, and I think at some point it's become this difference of how close you get to people that you want to continue to do business on a mass scale. And there's,
Okay,
artists...
so in your career, have you seen an evolution?
I mean, I vacation with Straight No Chaser. They're a band I do a lot of business with.
Right.
There's very few other acts, and we do a lot of business with a lot of acts where we do a ton of volume with them. But it stops at the dinner. There's a line.
Okay, what about like you did a lot of work with the Trailer Park Boys? Will the line be there too?
That one kind of evolved into a similar world with Chaser, where we stay at the same hotels, take the days off together, get into a little bit of trouble. They're definitely more of an 80s type of rock band when they tour. And I missed that because I came up too late. I missed the Motley Crue Dr. Feelgood tour.
Well, the problem is the camera phones killed all that.
And the Trailer Park Boys have gotten in trouble for that too, because they exist now. The comedians are different too, though. And as I've done more and more comedy, the bands don't discuss business is usually the rule. If you're hanging out with the band,
right,
you don't discuss business if the manager or agent is there. And you make broad strokes, concepts.
Listen,
for
this is something that took me a while. After I started my newsletter, people call up to meet. I would immediately talk business. I figured that, and you didn't know, they don't want to talk business. They want to find out who you are. And then I was at a dinner last night with big manager, big lawyer, and one of the biggest agents. And we didn't talk business for a half an hour. It's like we were covering politics, we're covering babies. Now you learn that.
Yeah, it comes in time. But the comics are different. The comics are smart enough to think for themselves. They write their own material.
Right.
In most cases, they are involved with the management of their career and their brand. And the comics will sit down with you immediately and start talking about their future and the vision and the path and how you can help. And it doesn't matter if the agent or manager aren't at the table. You're allowed to talk business with the comics because the comics are smart enough to have those conversations with you. And that line of business has accepted itself to being okay. It's deemed appropriate to have those conversations. Of course, if something comes up, you loop the manager and agent in immediately about what you talked about. Nothing's done around anybody, but it's okay to have those conversations. Where in music, you still keep it light, and it's supposed to go through the manager and agent if business is being talked.
Well, the manager certainly is always worried about losing his act. To a degree, the agent too. But also, I think that the musicians, if they, really good musician, if they could do anything else, they would be doing it. I would say, musicians who really get a lot of crap, a great percentage of the greats, they couldn't even work at 7-Eleven because they couldn't show up on time. And there's all kinds of crazy things. You look at them, you see these people, Remember the Fat Boys? They had a big kid.
Louie.
Right. And he got a car which he customized with a big hat on the back. Okay. And it cost him like $15,000. So, and ultimately they ran out of money. But if we were in the same spot, we would make different choices. It's like Bill Clinton and all these other people who are politicians, Gary Hart. And they do things, say, hey, if this is my issue, keeping my dick in my pants, I could keep my dick in my pants for 4 years president and then do things. But I could never be president. It's whatever's inside of him, that hunger, etc. In terms of creating music, this is we're in a totally different era now, post 2010, in terms of major labels. But in the heyday of classic rock, the deals changed. You could cut in any studio you wanted to, and the label could say whatever they wanted to, but they had to put out the record, and you got to choose what was on the record. Now you make a record. The record company won't put it out. Well, we're not putting it out. It doesn't have this. It doesn't have that. So it really has changed other than the indie thing. But getting back to the comedian, the comedian thing always blows my mind. You're on the road. Maybe you have a road manager if you're a really big comedian, whatever, blah, 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 buddy to be on the road with. And maybe you travel with a mic. But after that, all the money is yours. It's like the costs are so low. It's just incredibly profitable.
Well, the joke has always been, here's your check, here's your mic. Have a good night. And up until the 2,500 seaters, that's the case. But now you're starting to see, obviously, video's now a thing for the bigger ones. And the IMAX are really helpful because you really need to see the facial expressions of comedians as they're building into amphitheaters and arenas past the 2,500 seaters. And it's happening. You're seeing these acts play the amphitheaters and stadiums now. And the number of tickets that Chappelle and Joe Rogan sold in Tacoma was insane.
Well, this happened first in the UK. Like 10 years ago, the comedians were selling out arenas. I have a lot of friends there, and I had some friends who were involved in that. And it's like, that's really good business. By the same token, now I'll get myself in deep doo-doo with an insider business. Most of these comedians are more cutting edge than the musicians. They're providing something. It's like this last Chappelle special. Man, and I haven't even finished it because I'm in the midst of some 70-episode cop show. But every newspaper has had an opinion piece about this, okay? Where they're not having opinion pieces about records, okay? Chappelle, when he's talking, issues of race, issues of, Michael Jackson, guilt or not, he's touching the real issues. Where the big musicians, they're worried about brand extensions. What musicians don't understand is they can't make the big money. When I grew up in the 60s or 70s, a musician was as rich as anybody in America, okay? I mean, a very successable musician.
Top 10%, top 1%,
right.
Right.
Obviously, they had royalty, kings and queens in Europe, whatever, but not in America. I mean, you go to somebody's father's a stockbroker, works on Wall Street. You don't think they're a billionaire then. Then we have this evolution. Reagan legitimizes greed, and these people make taxes go down. All these people have all this money. Well, a couple of things. One, life gets very hard. If you talk to how old's your daughter?
13.
Okay. You're going to find out, if not already, by the time she starts thinking about going to college, she'll be very sophisticated. Your parents, so she's been around. They know there's two rungs of life, upper and lower. And anybody who's middle class and above, they don't want to be on the lower. Like what I say, I graduated from college. I was a ski bum. Nobody will do that who wants to be a upper. I got to immediately get a job. I got to get on my career. I got to get this. Otherwise, I'm not going to be able to make ends meet. When I moved to LA and I'm working in the sporting goods store, I'm making like $65 a week. I can pay my rent. I can live my life. You literally can't do that on minimum wage today. You can't even do it on $15. So in the 60s and 70s, let's be very clear. There's always been a music business. Certainly changed when there were recordings like the turn of the last century. But there was music, and then the Beatles came along, changed everything. I can go deep into that, but a lot of that people know. It was the middle-class people in America who made the music with middle-class values, okay? Great example would be Jefferson Airplane, in that they did and said whatever they want. Up against the wall, motherfucker, don't mean shit to a tree. They were doing their act. Then as life got harder, those people didn't make music. In addition, those people, no matter how attractive or whatever, they were always different. They were like on the art track. They were not the people who are cheerleaders, who are not people who are football players, whatever. Whereas today, music is seen as a way to make money. Of course, there are people not doing that way, but most of the people protesting they're not doing that way are not top-line artists, okay? They're not selling out arenas all over America. So, and forget the people who started before. That's a whole different thing. So the values are different. The lower classes go into this and they see it as a way to make money. They don't realize, okay, let's go back to U2. They did 2 arena tours, but before the 2 arena tours, they did the 360 tour where they played stadiums all over the country, all over the world. Okay. So by time they were done, the net was like $250 million, and they split the money 5 ways. So, okay, they do their best not to pay taxes. That's been well documented. They're from Ireland, but they have Dutch Antilles coming. And I crossed it with the people who paid them. So I said, okay, they made $50 million for 2.5 years' work. Let's not forget.
Per guy.
Yeah. Let's not forget, Bono had to take some time off for a back injury, so it extended it, but it was really 2.5 years' work. In addition, the people who paid them, it wasn't 50. It was lower than that. Let's just call it 40, okay? $40 million. So what that basically is $20 million a year, okay? Because you work a half year. What do we know? You can't go back out. You've taken all the money out of the marketplace. And then when they did go back out and play arenas twice, they did not go clean everywhere, okay? Where there are people on Wall Street, they make $20 million. $20 million is low for a top guy. They make $20 million every year. And at that period of time, U2 was the biggest grossing act, okay? I mean, so when you're saying, about my money, it's like, no, you're not in the same league as the people who are truly moneyed today, okay? The tech people, the Wall Street people. So what an artist can do is create art that impacts that world, okay? They can speak truth to power. But that paradigm is long gone because everybody's chasing, I want to have a perfume line, I want to have clothing, I want to do this and that. And it cuts the credibility. That's another thing that bothers me. If you talk to any of the people in infrastructure and business, managers, agents, label people, they said, the kids today don't worry about it, don't care about endorsements. Of course they care, okay? In that they're living at home, they're not going to be stars, and they look up to this person. They see the person whore themselves out. They might admire them in a certain way, but it's not a one-on-one bonding. Let's go to the other extreme. Somebody like Neil Young. One thing everybody knows for sure, he's going to do whatever the fuck he wants. No one can tell him what to do, okay? And he's not interested in money first and foremost. So there's a different relationship with the act. Of course, there's the whole influencer thing we can get into where, yes, individuals can become stars themselves, but that's a different thing from music, and very few people really succeed anyway.
There's a whole lot there, Tom.
Go for it. You ask me anything.
Let's go back to Chappelle for a second.
Okay.
You said you haven't finished it, but I imagine you've taken a good part of it. Is anything that he said offended you or surprised you?
Okay, I'll go back because he's in the middle of some stories. I'm not exactly sure where he's going, okay?
But clearly got into the Michael Jackson thing, which
right,
is...
Right, well, yeah, I just finished the Michael Jackson thing, I think. But let's go back to the previous Chappelle special. I think it was only the previous, where he had the special that launched on Netflix on New Year's Eve. And I certainly remember and watched all that. This is New Year's Eve after the Me Too shit goes crazy, okay? He stood up there and he said, listen, women, you got to include the guys in this discussion. If you don't include the guys, there will be no progress. And he couldn't be more right, okay? Because what he's saying, I don't remember if he actually said that or it's what I think, you and me know you can't weigh in on Me Too shit. You can't wait because you'll be assassinated. I mean, someone like me who writes it, and as I say, shit comes out automatically, and I hate, this is a whole other thing having to do with writing, but you write certain shit, okay? And I leave it in. And blowback's going to be just because you mentioned it. So I think Chappelle was right about that. This special seems more politically incorrect, but I really don't want to weigh in until I finish it, just because I want to be able to say the whole thing. Okay. I don't think I'm skipping the question here. I just want to be accurate.
No, it's fair. I just feel like there's nothing that he's going to be able to say that's going to shock you, because that's his job to say what he thinks. And I think he's a guy that says what he thinks. It might shock people that he brought it up, but at the end of the day, it's just like, if you think about it, it's just like, it's what he does.
Well, think about it as the relevant aspect. That's what he's getting to do, where the mindless Spotify top 50 people are not, is you listen to that shit and you don't go home and turn on the television. You literally are thinking about it, whether you agree or disagree. So when you watch Chappelle, you're not sure whether he's poking the dog, if that's the term, trying to, stimulate you, or whether he's trying to convey shit he is, he just believes. Okay. I mean, it's been well established. And once again, we're on dangerous territory. Okay. It's established that, yes, coming out, that a lot of rappers have made homophobic remarks. Okay. So one could take that. This is all dangerous territory once again. And therefore you can say, well, it's harder to be gay in the gay world. Lil Nas X came out and that seems to be okay. But, was it Frank Ocean who was talking, issues of sexuality was a really big deal. Okay. So the issue people are talking with Chappelle, and I don't know if it's fair, but that's where they're seeing it. Is he representative of African-American thinking? I think that's why it's such a big deal.
That's an interesting thing. Let's jump ahead and get away from the dangerous stuff for a second.
Okay.
We've gone through college. We've done some history. We've done law school. How did you find the music industry?
Okay. It's funny because in my tenure in Los Angeles, the music business was centered in Los Angeles and then moved maybe slightly bigger in New York, and now it's all in Los Angeles again. Not that you can't break anywhere, but once Lucien Grange took over Universal and decided to live in L.A., that everything came towards L.A. So when you're living in L.A., don't forget this is pre-internet era, everybody is here. And I would take courses while I was in law school at UCLA Extension, and concert. I always knew more than everybody else because I was just that hungry to know all this shit. So what happened was, leaving out the dead ends, is a good friend of my sister's from college who I knew. She was a booker at a TV show, talk show in Boston, and she got a gig as one of the original bookers at Entertainment Tonight. And she moved to L.A., and she introduced me to the guy who booked and produced all the rock music shit, okay? And I became friendly with him. And then he said, well, I'm going to have this music video cassette company with this guy, Charles Band. I said, I know who Charles Band is because I used to do, movie deals where he made the movie and he wanted to keep the video cassette rights, which I thought was hysterical. Okay. But it turned out he had the first independent video company, Wizard Video. And I ultimately got the job working for Charles Band. It was an interesting thing. We had a lot of divisions. We had the movie making division. We had the boiler room where they were selling video cassettes. We had a video game division. I ran the music division. We made a record. He and I owned the company with Freddie Moore. Freddie Moore had a band called The Cats. They morphed into the New Cats. Then they were called Boy. We put the record out as Boy Next Door. The reason this is important is Freddie Moore's wife was Demi Moore. Okay. And she'd been in one of Charlie's, her first movie was a previous movie that Charlie had made called Parasite in 3D. So, I used to hang at their apartment, which wasn't that far from the office, and, every day. I could tell you stories ad infinitum. Let's put it, she was on General Hospital now. Demi Moore comes from nothing, very sharp. You knew she was going to make it from like day one. So in any event, we would make movies on a regular basis. Everybody makes movies now because of digital recording and before that even, cheap camcorders. But to make a movie then was difficult. You had to make it in 35 millimeter. It cost like $1 million to make a movie. And we made a number of movies. And then Charlie called me one Sunday at like 10 o'clock and said, did you read today's calendar section? The LA Times, so about 15 years ago, had a tabloid section called Calendar, all about entertainment. Far more news than you ever got in the arts and leisure section of the New York Times. And he says, you see that article about the band throwing meat into the audience? I want to put that band in one of our movies. So the article was written by Chris Morris, and I got a hold of Chris Morris. What is the phone number of the guy in the band? Blackie Lawless. The band was called Wasp. So I figured
hair metal band from the 80s.
Exactly. And I feel that Blackie's really a rock and roller, I think it was like 11:30 at night, I should be able to call him and pick up. So yes, I do call him, and I said, we want you to come in the office, think about a movie. Don't forget, this is a dream come true for an unsigned band. He comes into the office all dressed up, whatever. Blackie's a very smart guy, okay? I can't necessarily say that about the rest of the people in the band, but Blackie was very intelligent. We ended up putting them in a movie called Rage War. Rage War, one of the significant things is most of the movies were sci-fi stuff. Bull from Night Court, he was in that before he was in Night Court. But we filmed Wasp at the Troubadour one very long night. And if you've ever made a movie, there's a lot of hanging around. So I became tight with Blackie, and he's telling me all his crazy stories. This is an unsigned act. Some things never change, although it was a day of much less data. And he said he sold out the Country Club. At the time, that was the big club in L.A. in Reseda. So we finished the movie. I would talk to Blackie, and he says, play in the Country Club. I said, I'm going to go out there and see if it's really sold out. Held about 1,100. And I went there, it was like 900 people there. So I said, wow, this is something, I should still, pay attention to. And Blackie's always blowing smoke. This is L.A. Let me be clear. When I graduated from law school and I stopped practicing law, before the lawyer come me back for like Canon Films, etc., in that it takes 2 years to find out who's real and who's not in L.A. Everybody's got a story. And don't forget, rock stars, are not Harvard graduates, although, what's his name in Weezer is, but most people are not, okay? So they have a good switch. And for you to find out what's real or what's not, whatever. But at this point, I'd paid my dues. I said, something real is here. I'm going to maintain contact with Blackie. And Blackie always said, oh, yeah, the manager of Iron Maiden, we're going to make a deal. I'm rolling my eyes. So Blackie comes to my office. Says, can I bring the manager of Iron Maiden into the office like at 2 o'clock? Of course I say yes, because I'm a fucking idiot. He comes in with Rod Small and we're talking music. I'm too dumb to realize he doesn't want to talk to me. Okay. I have 3/4-inch videotape of an unsigned band. That doesn't exist. No one has that kind of shit. It just costs too much money. And he's going to talk to me just long enough till he gets to the ask. The ask is, can I have the video cassette? At this point, I was number 2 in the company. Charlie was number 1. There were 2 3/4-inch video cassettes that could not leave the building, just could not leave the building. Finally, I said, okay, you can take this 3/4-inch video cassette, but it has to come back today. It just has to. No matter what, it's like, I'm going to lose my, it just has to come back today. It did. Blackie brought it back at the end of the day. A couple of days later, Blackie says, can I come see you? Sure. Comes to the office, goes, are you really a lawyer? I said, yeah. Said, oh, yeah, I really need to know, are you really a lawyer or whatever? I said, yeah. And then, he's not going to, and I said, oh, I have a bar card in my pocket. So I whip out the bar card. I'm a lawyer. He goes, I need you to make a management deal with Sanctuary, who are going to sign us, the Iron Maiden company. So a couple of things happen. One, I'm busy negotiating the contract, which cracks up the lawyer on the other side. That's my personality. I'm an I dotter and T dotter, which this guy can't believe. And the deal is unbelievably rich because don't forget, Iron Maiden was the biggest worldwide act on Capitol at that particular point in time. So the deal was for $500,000 right up front. It was an incredibly rich deal.
This is for Wasp?
Yes. So we make the deal. And then I continue to hang around Blackie. They cut the legendary song Animal Fuck Like a Beast. Why is it legendary? That's the first song the Parents Music Resource Group, Tipper Gore, cracked down on. Okay. So,
well, that's pretty amazing.
So I'm in the studio and they're cutting the record, and a record has to be mastered. Mastering is a funny thing now. Today, everybody says they're a mastering engineer and they do it digitally. There's even software that does it automatically, but it's still at the elite level. There's a small club of people who master records. The guy who mastered metal records at the time was this guy, George Marino at Sterling Sound in New York. He did the rest. They didn't sound right. Okay, let's go back to Freddie Moore. We cut the album or the EP with Freddie Moore. Ended up going to this place called Precision Mastering, where they mastered it. 2 things happened. They had done, at this point in time, they'd only started like a year before, but they'd done Stevie Wonder's Hotter Than July. They had a special lathe that no one else had. Everybody else used the Neumann. They had this other crazy thing. So went in there. My boss wrote him a bad check. So then I had to talk to them and become friends with them. Then, and this is astounding, they cut the record too hot and it skipped. I ended up becoming friends with these people. And the mastering engineer, to this day, I introduced him to his wife. I mean, Phil, a good friend. At the time, if you wanted to book mastering, it was like 2 or 3 weeks in advance. But I called up my friend, Stephen Marcuson, and I said, hey, here's an opportunity because he didn't normally cut metal. Can you cut this tonight? Absolutely. Come at 8 o'clock. Okay, so we EQ the record. And if you know the process at the time, you have to EQ, then you have to cut lacquers. Okay, in this particular case, the band members didn't have any turntables. All they had was cassette players. And you could only cut, at the time, you could do 1 or 2 cassettes at a time, and he could only cut 1 or 2 lacquers. Well, it got to be like 11 o'clock at night. I'm there with 2 band members, and they say, it's too boring for us. Okay, we got to leave, go to the Rainbow, because you went to the Rainbow every night. I said, okay, I'll be here, and I can tell you amazing Rainbow stories. But Richard, the guy who was the roadie from Led Zeppelin, how come I can't remember his name? He was there every night in the corner. But I then showed up with the refs. And Rod Smallwood could be intimidating. He could be actually very nice, but he could be intimidating. He goes, I don't understand this. Why are you here with the refs? He goes, I thought you were the lawyer. And I feel, intimidated. So, I knew this guy. He goes, you shouldn't be a lawyer. You should be a manager. When my partner comes back to LA, we're going to make a deal. Okay. I'm still working on some movie stuff. It was worked on this.
You'd be thrilled. You're about to be a manager in Iron Maiden's camp.
Right. So I'm there, and the American Gladiators, the guy who created that, he's from basically Cleveland. I have a friend from Cleveland. We were working on that. It was going to be a movie first. But then Rod calls me. His partner is there. We make a deal. So he owned a house on Weatherly, just above the Rainbow, that Peter Sellers had purchased, but he died before he could move in. Okay. So we moved the operation into that business. One of the most hilarious, this is 1984. One of the most hilarious things is they're literally getting ready to go to LAX and leave. Don't forget, at this point in time, I think it may be shorter now, but at the time you could be 90 days in America, then you had to pay taxes. Okay. So they would not be in America, all the time. This comes up later. So they say, you got any cash? Okay. And I figured they're going to the airport. They need, what do you need, like 20, 40 bucks? He goes, no, do you have any company cash? Well, as I say, it was a very rich operation. We got all this money. It was they would pay studio time in advance, things that I wouldn't do. Where does your leverage? And they go, here's $4,500. What am I going to do with $4,500 cash? Because I put it in my front pocket because you're going to need it. And you do end up needing it by virtue of the fact that everybody who's in the band and associated band, they don't have credit cards. Oh, we want to rent a skeleton. Needs $1,000 deposit. Okay, here's $1,000. So I'm running the whole operation. So it's WASP, Iron Maiden in America, and we had a travel agency at the time. And I'm not complaining, but I'm working 24/7. And there would be times we had a very rich deal. So we're doing the first video. First video budget was going to be $40K. That's what the label guaranteed us. So we're 15 of our own money in, but we have plenty of money. Okay. So I call Capital. This is what you did call. And I said, okay, you have to pay us $25,000, and then we pay the rest on delivery. They go, we only cut checks on Thursday and we're going to shoot on Wednesday. And I say, well, you can either cut me the check or I'll bill you for the $15,000 we're already in. Of course. So then I call Rod. Rod's in the Bahamas. Okay. And he goes, that's why I hired you. So I was like the big guy standing up to Capital, and they did cough up the check. So just to tell the story to now, Wired wrote about this. And let me be very clear. I'm doing all this work. And then I have to do legal. I wasn't hired as a legal person. They said, you got to go meet this guy at what's now the W Hotel in Westwood. Something about a festival, blah, blah, blah. And I go, and it's the guys from Rock in Rio, the very first Rock in Rio. But the lawyer they're using is like from the Frank Sinatra firm. Okay. So there was a very famous guy, I forget his name, who ran the firm. I was the only one music business savvy. I had to write the contract for Iron Maiden to play Rock in Rio. Okay. So I'm working around the clock.
There's not an agency in the middle of that?
No, not at all. No agent involved in that.
You got to save 10% because you wrote your own
check.
No,
this was the very first Rock in Rio. So they weren't really sure it was going to happen. And how are you going to agree on a price? And then you had billing. I remember Rod didn't want Def Leppard over the bill on them. He was saying, oh, Def Leppard's not really a metal band, et cetera, et cetera. So it's basically billing and price because they were locking up all these people. So Blackie had wanted to produce the album himself. Capitol did not let them. So he got this guy, Mike Varney, who at the time got this is a lot of history. Young people won't know. But he had an album, a label. It wasn't Metal Blade. That was the other guy. It was something like that. And he had all the hot guitars. And he produced it with his engineer, and it came back and it sounded like shit. So I said to myself, it's just not releasable. So Blackie, who's like 6'4", comes in, and I said, Blackie, I don't think, it's got to be remixed. And Blackie says, it doesn't need to be remixed, blah, blah, blah. I won't remix it unless Carter says to do it. This is John Carter, famous for two things. He'd written the lyrics for Incense and Peppermints, and shortly thereafter, he engineered Tina Turner's comeback.
Incense and Peppermints, Strawberry Alarm Clock?
Exactly. So what happens is I go to Carter, I play the cassette, he turns to me and he goes, I passed on this band 3 times. Do whatever you want to. So now my head is hanging low. I go back to the office of the house, and then Blackie comes. He knew I love chocolate chip cookies. Comes with a bag of Mrs. Fields because he played the tracks for other people. Okay. And people said, hey, it needs to be remixed. At the time, the biggest, most successful act in that genre was Quiet Riot. Come on, Feel the Noise. Frankie Benali was a big fan of the band. I think at some point he ended up playing with Wasp. He was a good guy. And so I get Dwayne Barron, who remixed the Quiet Riot album, to remix the Wasp version. Of course, when you remix, you got the limited basic tracks. Okay. I'm thinking of all the names here. It's so long ago. So he remixes the album. He makes it good. So one of these tracks is now like playable. And in addition, MTV used to go through these changes. And MTV was now in one of their, we're not playing metal changes. So they had this song called Love Machine, Love. Suddenly said, that could be the single. That'd be great. Blackie said, no, has to be I Want to Be Somebody, because he had a plan in his mind, had to be that track. Okay. I stood up to him. We made a video for I Want to Be Somebody, the one I mentioned earlier. And then we were making a video for Love Machine. Hired this guy who had done this previous movie, been Bad Boys. And this was, when you get movie directors, whatever, this is big money. It was like $90,000. And he had the band members on these let's call them gurneys that would flip up so they come right into camera. Now the band pulls a rock and roll moment. They don't want it to be that way. They don't want to have that look. Finally, after hours, you convince them to do it. Capitol loved the video. Said, this is the best video we've seen in a long time, blah, 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 blah. I'm supposed to fly to England like within 5 days. And Rod had a partner, Andy Taylor, who came, and I had a better relationship with Andy than I did with Rod. We really connected. And suddenly he was in town, and we met, and he was going to fire me, which blew my mind. I was doing, literally, when they fired me, they had hired 2 people to replace me, and they had to hire a lawyer to do the job. It never crossed my mind. It was like indispensable. But I stood up to Blackie, who had a good relationship, one too many times. And then then Rod was on the phone. What difference does it make if the album sells only 100,000 copies on the first time? Which just blew my mind. 100,000 was, lower part of significant in that era. And I was shocked. And I said, no, I'm blah, 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 blah. And I argued for my job. And they said, okay, let's meet tomorrow. And we met tomorrow at some restaurant. He says, no, this is the end. I was really shocked. And now the nature of those jobs is you cannot spend $1 because you're working around the clock. I mean, there's no expense account or whatever. So I lived on that money for like a year and a half. I worked on a couple of movies, but it was difficult to get work because I was seen as this big guy. I would be telling Capitol Records what to do. So they figure a lot of stories, but I work on a couple of movies as a music supervisor. And then I'm running out of money. And my shrink sends me to this job counselor. And there's a famous book called What Color is Your Parachute? And it turns out that a workbook, I didn't know, you have to write these 6 essays. And the job counselor said, write these essays and brag about yourself. That was and I wrote the essays and I reminded, I was really into writing. The other thing, working for WASP, we had these publicity companies. We had enough money, we get the independent publicity people. And I'd always have to rewrite the bios. They were just fucking terrible. So all of a sudden a bell went off in my head. Well, maybe I could be a writer. So then I sent shit to the magazines. I said, wait a minute here. This is just like the music business. You want to get in the magazine, you got to know those people. I don't know those people. All in New York. So I was sitting at Flaky Jake's at Pico and Sepulveda. It was a burger joint, which is, the building is something else now. this big space. And I was reading Billboard, eating a hamburger. And I said, this is terrible. I could do a better job than this. This is 86. And all of a sudden I realized, wait a second, they have a computer. Maybe I can actually do something. And I go home and wake up my girlfriend and says, you should do it. I bought this book called Risking. I read it. And I said, okay, I'm going to do this. And I had a credit card from being a lawyer with $5,000 in credit. And I then went out and got a Mac Plus and I started. And I had a whole plan. I started in May of 86. And I said, okay, the first issue is going to come out the week after Labor Day. I bought this directory, the album network, Yellow Pages of Rock.
I remember those. They came out every year, $75.
Exactly. I got really into computers, really into it. I was just thrilled, okay, which I did not anticipate. This was, the first revolution was late 70s, Apple II. I was totally out of it then. I famously said, I'm not going to get a computer until you talk to it. So I was super into the computers, and I started the newsletter, and I had only the most successful people subscribed. At the time, it came out once every 2 weeks, religiously on the same day.
Did you name it the Lefsetz note then? Was that
what it was?
It was
called the Lefsetz letter right then. It was 6 pages, sometimes 8 pages, because you went past 8 pages, you had to pay more
postage
in postage. So I immediately heard from the president, Clive Davis. Clive Davis was the only person who ever canceled a subscription. But he, Tim Donahue, everybody ran every label. At the time, it was tips. Traditionally in the music business, tip is a radio tip. That's what it was. Every article was incisive. How to help you do this, do that, whatever. I was like, well, because I was doing it to get on the job in the record business. I didn't expect the newsletter to be successful. So I did the newsletter, and then a lot of bad shit happened. My ex-wife moved out because I married the girls had to do it. And my father got sick and died, and I ran completely out of money. And the 90s were bleak, okay? But I had a free subscription to AOL starting in 92, okay? And I really didn't use it, but I was in this magazine Tower Records had called Pulse, and they printed my address one time, which shocked me. But I got all these letters from people, They used to put out, I think it was 450,000 copies.
These were the free previews that they put in all the stores around the country.
Right. So some woman going to the University of Michigan started to write a letter to me. She was 19, and she was saying, and then she said, do you have an email address? And I said, well, I have this guy. I have an email address. And she starts emailing me. She starts talking about this guy she's in love with. And okay, I'm listening to the stories. And the guy's name was Chad. And all of a sudden it came out, which blew my mind. She'd never met the guy. And the guy went to a school 2 states away. This is my first experience with the craziness of the internet. So, this is when you had to pay by the minute. And I could be on all the time. So I was on, I lost more than this, but certainly from 96 to the year 2000, I was on the internet 24/7. Before anybody, I knew every nook and cranny, the dating and this and whatever. I was just, it was just insane. I was so intrigued. So leaving some stories out, let's get to the crux. I'm going to Jim Louis' Aspen conference. Second year I go, which is 1997. I write something because I feel so excited about the experience. And I said it, and I got a great reaction from the Aspen people. Go the next year, everybody's giving the great reaction. That year, 98, I don't write anything. And I come back in 99 and people say, well, why didn't you write anything? I said, well, that's not how it works. I work on inspiration, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And for the first time ever, at the end of 99, Louis sent a contact sheet with email addresses. I said, whoa, that gets me excited. I could, email people. Ultimately, I had friends in the book business, and they're putting out this book about David Geffen called The Operator. And I had a weekend before basically anybody who's a regular person. So I wrote about it and sent it to the people on my Aspen list, and it just blew up. And then I said, whoa, something's going on here. And at the time, that year, Album Network put out a little book of people's email addresses. Because everybody didn't have email, but I found the people who were subscribers and I sent it. Then all of a sudden, strange things started to happen. The original manager of REM, he's got a unique name. As I said, so many names here, whatever. But Jefferson Holt, he's now emailing me. And I said, well, this is cool, but how did you get this? Because you're not on my list. He says, I got it from Mark Williams, the A&R guy. I said to myself, well, this is interesting because Mark Williams isn't on my list either.
People are forwarding your emails.
So I experienced virality. Then legendary manager, this guy, David Krebs, really smart guy. He worked at William Morris. Before that, he got a business MBA and a law degree from Columbia. He managed, most famously, AC/DC, Nugent, built Aerosmith from scratch. He's the first person who called me about my newsletter, and I went to visit. He lives in New York, still a friend to this day. Calls me one day of March of the year 2000 and says, where are all the acts on Napster? Okay. I write about this, and I immediately hear from Cliff Bernstein, who manages Metallica. That's why Metallica sued Napster. Okay. None of those people even used a computer at that particular time. So I become the expert on Napster because I have a law degree. It was the only time having a law degree really paid off. I knew copyright law. So suddenly everybody at the time, they're all talking to me. Okay. I was under the illusion that they would sue Napster, shut it down, and then make a deal with them. That was untrue. So suddenly it's all viral. And to get on the list, you had to email me. You had the people who subscribe. So I didn't charge anybody for a subscription, okay, till their subscriptions ran out. And then you could email me to get on the list, but it was not automatic. A lot of craziness goes down. Then there are a lot of issues sending that many emails through AOL. Finally,
there's a cutoff, right? There's like a max. I remember that.
No. The way it worked was you could hit send, okay, but people might get it 2 weeks later. So I called, and if you went to any individual ISP, they had a limit of like 150 emails an hour, which wasn't going to work for me. So I called AOL, and I started explaining what I was doing. And like, they're mindful, you can't do that. You can't send thousands of emails, blah, 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 blah. So I realized I needed my own server. That became a big deal because you can't send email. The plans for then $20, I say you can send 150 emails an hour, which isn't going to work for me. Ultimately, I get my own server. And when I finally get that straightened out, since I have my own thing, I automate the mailing list. Okay. And then, of course, this is 2005. Then it just goes nuclear beyond that. So what happens is I'm at the bleeding edge of all this shit that is commonplace now. I got to go to the shrink and talk about this hate email. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Okay. And then now Jimmy Kimmel does hate tweets on TV. But just by being in the space early.
You're the founder of hate email.
No. I would be going, before this was all the sexual interaction on AOL. And you go and tell people, you get blank stares. I mean, now this is well-known stuff without going. But when you would talk, well, I did this, and they would have no idea what you were talking about. So I was now at the same time, from the year 1999 to about 2015, music business was the canary in the coal mine for digital disruption. And this was a story not only in the music business, but everywhere. And I was the number one guy on this. Okay. And you had to fight a lot of establishments. Don't forget, at first, the heads of the companies had their emails printed. Then you had the war of, CDs are better. You even get that. Then you had the war of iTunes. Then you had the war of streaming, which people are still fighting, even though the train left the station years ago. So for about 15 years, the business was fascinating. I was the guru, and it was more interesting than the music. Now, at this point, we have the technology figured out in the music business. There are people arguing, but there's always issues, a little of this, but the main issues are solved. It's streaming, et cetera, et cetera. So the music business is not driving, it's not as exciting at a business level. Now, it's interesting because the TV and movie business are going through these transitions that we went through, okay? How many streaming services are you going to want to subscribe to? What's available, et cetera. So now the focus is on the content itself. But in this interim, the landscape has completely changed because once it really started to shift to the internet at first, a lot of people just didn't wake up.
Can you pause for 1 sec?
Yeah.
You say that you're not charging for subscriptions.
No.
And you'd run out of money. How are you?
Well, I'll tell you two things. A, I ran out of money. I remember the times, my bank account, I'd have $17 in it. Okay. And in addition, my landlady died and the people who owned the building inherited it in Indiana. I wrote them bad checks. but they didn't cash them for a few months. So I was literally living.
That's got to be
hand-to-mouth.
stressful.
I could tell you story after story after story. You go and buying, the 39-cent shit to microwave, you can't pay to park, you can't go to dinner. I mean, it's really bad. And then my father died, and for like 3 years there, 94, 95, 96, I got money from my first year. It was like 24,000. Next year was like 16,000. Next year was like 12,000. With that and the money I was making from the newsletter, I could just eke by.
Wait a minute. How did you make money on the newsletter? If
I
you
charged, originally charged.
Okay, so you were charging for the subscription
until the year 2000.
Okay, so there was a little bit of revenue.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then I was, as I said, I was on the bleeding edge of all this shit because once my reach was wider, more business opportunities came up. People wanted to fly you to speak where, whatever. Yeah, I'm testimony to that. Yeah, you got to know when in the cycle to monetize. So
when you go out to the conferences, you get paid for that.
I will not go if you don't pay. I mean, let's be clear. The biggest paydays are not in music. This is why you'll see a lot of people leave the labels and first work with music and then go straight. Music is always nickel and diming you. You do anything for a corporation, whatever. They've got the money. They just have to decide whether to send it to you. So it's like I'm doing something for financial people in November, which I can't talk about. And then some other financial people back in May, they wanted my perspective because they do these investments. Now, the majority is music. Okay. But if the people in business want you, whatever, but at first I would fly because I liked going to these places. I used to go, Tony Wilson was a great guy, became a good friend of mine, then died. He had this conference in England, which I wouldn't charge to go to. But at this point, no. Everybody else is making, normally people see speaking at a conference as advertisement for yourself. And I tell these people, and I'm not lying, if I sit at home and write something great, that's going to pay much more dividends than speaking at your conference. That doesn't mean I don't want to go. It's just you have to pay me.
Your time's got value.
Like when you have a gig in LA, it's great. Sometimes they're high-paying gigs. You go. And, you go home. But I say, I'm going to Australia. I mean, I'm certainly getting paid. I got to fly 14 hours there. I'm there for like 4 or 5 days to come back. If you've ever flown in that direction, fly back. And for at least a week, you're fucked up. Then like 5 days later, I have to go to New York. I'm not saying that it's not worth it. But if they asked me to go to New York for free, I would say no.
That makes sense. Okay, so we'll jump back into the story that we were talking about for a second. But now you've got the radio show
right
on Sirius, and I am sure that there's a salary involved with that, and you've got your speaking gigs. But the early on, when you were barely charging for the letter, it was the appearances and it was the little income that was coming in from the letter that was keeping you afloat.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's put it this way. By time 94, when I got a little money, I started going to see a psychiatrist. To say this was right after the earthquake, to say I was at wit's end would be too charitable. I mean, I was really, because what I was doing to make more money, I was trying to constantly drive more subscriptions, which also cost me money to send postage. And I had lists of different types of people, producers, managers, whatever, blah, blah. And I had little check marks, how many times I'd email, how many times I'd send mail to them. I was working round the clock and living on almost nothing. I mean, listen, people were inviting me to lunch. I could go to any show I wanted to, but that didn't, put money in the coffers.
Got it. Okay. Appreciate the insight because you had painted the picture of running out of money and then starting a free newsletter. And I was kind of trying to figure out how you were sustaining that.
The 90s were, as I say, really, I remember just talking about this the other day. I had purchased in the 80s this really top end VCR. It cost about $800 NEC. It was unbelievable. It had a little screen in the remote. So programming VCRs was always really difficult. What I didn't know at the time is VCRs wear out. So I brought it to be repaired. Then I brought it to be repaired again. And I'm worried about the $100 that it's repaired. I'm on the phone with Peter Mensch. And he says, I'm telling you, I got my VHS unit. And he goes, mine breaks, so just buy a new one. That was not an option for me. And ultimately, they couldn't repair that one anymore. I went without a video recorder for a while.
Different time, different age.
Right. I mean, especially with everything being free, you need to pay the access, but you can reach anybody online, assuming they're paying attention to you. But back then, as I say, I could tell you a story. I'm not proud of it, but the fact I still have big issues with money. Still, super concerned about running out of money or gigs ending, whatever, because I was literally living hand to mouth. Let's be clear. Being a starving artist, there's no romance in that. What you find out is people are starving. All they're worried about is the next bill. You can't be an artist because it's like they say people are homeless for like a week, never get over it. Oh man, I totally understand. I mean, I wasn't homeless, but you're sitting, you can't go anywhere because you don't have any money. You go to the gas station and buy $3 worth of gas. I mean, I'll leave it at that.
It's some clear insight. Let's get back to the writing stuff. It seems like when you write, you can really lose yourself into some of those stories, some of the detail. Remember in particular, you writing about going to Electric Daisy in Vegas and
right.
The detail of the helicopter zooming by you as you're sitting in it. Like, I felt like I was with you in the helicopter, you driving over the pass in Colorado, white knuckle driving.
Right.
I felt like I was in the car with you. Your detail when you're writing sometimes is so amazingly crystal clear.
Well, thank you for the compliment, but first and foremost, I consider myself a writer. That's it. I was somewhere last night, I love the newsletter, but I like the podcast more. That's great. And I love doing the podcast. But first and foremost, I'm a writer and I don't do it how everybody else does it. Okay. In that people will tell you writing is rewriting. The Iowa Writers School. You can read these books and they're so dense, they're not really readable. My number one criterion, this is in live appearances too, is it must be entertaining. Content is secondary to people like me. All day long, people are sending you links. Most of the shit is unreadable. I mean, just, I can't read all those articles in a day. So I want it to be readable. I write it in very immediate style. So everything I write, I'm writing on inspiration. Since I've been doing it so long, I'm never going to write anything worse than an 8 or a 7. But you want to write an 11. You cannot write an 11 every day. So you're constantly trying to get to that level. And when you know it, when you do it, it's like I wrote something yesterday and you can tell, okay, this is going to get a reaction, which is not, I don't want to say I'm just trying to push people's buttons, but this is how you can separate an amateur from a pro. Musicians who say, no one knows something great. That just couldn't be more wrong. Al Cooper, legendary musician, producer. He produced first few Leonard Skinner albums. And I was talking to Al and he was telling the story just when the first album came out in the fall of 73 with Freebird on it. He got a call from Ronnie Van Zant. Ronnie Van Zant was in Florida and Al was in Atlanta. He says, I got to come to the studio. I got to come cut a record. I said, okay, come Monday. Band comes, cuts Sweet Home Alabama. Doesn't come out for a year. And I said, Al, did you know what was a hit? And he goes, it was Sweet Home Alabama. So when you do something great, even if you get no reaction, it touched somebody. It's very hard to do that. And anybody who's a musician or an artist, they'll tell you when they know when they hit the 11 and you don't want to cock it up. So that's another thing. I write everything. And now I used to wait. Now I feel you wait in a different mood. I reread it twice, primarily for spelling mistakes, grammar mistakes. I don't change it because I learned every time I change it, I fuck it up. Okay. Because it came out a certain way. It doesn't mean I might not make a mistake that I have to change, but almost never.
Okay, so you speak a lot live.
Right.
You've gotten to interview some of the most incredible people in our business.
Okay.
Who's been your favorite?
In terms of interview?
Yeah, who have you enjoyed the most speaking to with a mic in your hand?
Oh, speaking to with a mic. Well, I'll have to say how I met my girlfriend. She runs a foundation, the Opus Foundation. On the board is this guy, Bob Ezrin, who produced those Alice Cooper records, Pink Floyd, The Wall. Goes on.
Legend.
Right. I also knew Bob. Bob called me up to say, will you speak on this panel? I said, I'll speak on the panel. It just can't cost me any money. This was in Palo Alto. So he calls up the day before, because it was set up like in a month before. And he goes, you can cancel if you want. I don't cancel. I made a commitment. I'm going to go. First, then I get a manifest with like 6 names on it. No one else is paying, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And I see one Felice Mancini. I said, is that Henry Mancini's daughter? And I Google her. Okay. So I know what she looks like. Don't think twice. You get on the 737, Southwest, it goes up, it goes down. Being the guy I am, I've always had to pee a lot. I get off the plane, I pee, and I see nobody. I'm starting to freak out because I'm going for the day. I mean, I would never do this now, but I didn't have any contact numbers with me. You know, what the fuck am I going to do? And I'm start walking around the airport, and suddenly in the baggage claim, I see somebody walking. I realize it's Felice Mancini. I saw her picture. I said, "You looking for the limo?" And she goes, "Yeah." And we can't find it. And all of a sudden the limo driver showed up who was late. So we talked in the car, et cetera. This was for the Churchill Club. It's a networking tech club in Palo Alto. It was about the record business. And, the first person who spoke was Neil from the Grammys. He was boring. I forget the second person. And then Thomas Dolby from She Blinded Me with Science.
Yeah.
And then a lawyer who started with copyright law in the year 1300. It's like 500 people there. I'm dying. It's like, we've lost the audience long time before. And I said, so I got to me, I said something, I threw in a bunch of fucks and everything to wake up the audience. Okay. This turned off Felice, but ultimately we got together. So that's a real memorable time. A lot of times I remember the best one I ever did. And the guy who does the digital music news, he has a conference. It was at, what's the name of the hotel across from the Chinese theater? Not the Ambassador.
Oh, the Roosevelt?
Roosevelt. And I was so white hot. The only time I ever remember, I stood up at the end and just dropped the mic. Was that my drop the mic moment? And I go on and on. The other things, a lot of times it's just very cool because you're in these crazy places. I remember with the IMS, International Music Conference, at the beginning of the dance music season in Ibiza. I was interviewed there and I was white hot. You have to try, as I say, I view this as you got to get a hold of the audience, entertain the audience, and they can't leave. I mean, I must say, if I'm watching the audience and people, sometimes 1,000 people, and you see people talking to each other or you see people leave, I'm really thinking that. One of the best moments I had on this is I wrote the essay for the tour book for Def Leppard in 2005. And they were on this baseball bar tour with Bryan Adams. And Q Prime flew me out there for the gig because Tony DiCiaccio was going to be there and my sister lives there. So in any event, I know Bryan Adams. Just heard from him yesterday, as a matter of fact. Always a huge Bryan Adams fan. And I'm standing on the side of the stage at this ballpark in Minnesota. And they alternated who closed. So Bryan Adams had to go on during the day. And after like 3 songs, he looks at the band, because he's not getting that much of a reaction, and literally tears up the set list and then proceeds to work the audience till he closes them. I mean, I'm telling the story now 15 years later. One of the most amazing things I ever saw. And I was, 20 feet away, and I saw him work it and get everybody on the same page. Unbelievable.
But he was able to do it because he was
had that
skilled.
skill. Okay. And, the more you do it, you get better. But what the fuck? These are people in Minnesota. You're playing to 5,000 or 7,000 people, whatever it was, maybe a little bit more. If you're playing your hits, what fucking difference? No, he needed them to close them and let them know who he was.
Because he's a performer and he's going to own it. Okay, we have a very different style of interviewing people. I get the sense that when you interview somebody, you know exactly who they are, but you're a little bit more freeform with the conversation normally than I am. I'm very regimented in where I'm going.
Yes,
usually.
Believe me, I know, because I've seen you interview people. Styles are different.
Yeah, it's always interesting to see a guest when they realize you're going to be in the front row because you always sit right up front when you're in a room.
Right.
And it's funny because I've been in a room with you enough that I know you're going to be up front and I know you're going to be there. So it's not something that bothers me. I know you well enough that it's fine. It's that you're not a heckler.
No, there's no upside unless someone is, someone not like you, but occasionally when someone's wasting my time, I've gone on record about that.
No, and you usually wait until we open up your question. You're usually the first question, but you wait until.
The reason I'm the first question with you is because I don't want to get into the personal agendas. Most people who ultimately ask questions, they don't want an answer to a question. They want to argue. Usually after you've interviewed, you've touched a few points, and I usually have like 2 or 3 things I want to either get a clarification or one more step on. I don't want to argue with the person. If usually I don't, unless a lot of other people jump in. Where some people stand up, I work for this promotion company, we do this. No, that's not what I'm into.
Well, it's an interesting thing, though, and something you're very good at is you don't usually come into the conversation when you're interviewing someone.
Okay, well, first and foremost, you're right. I don't do it like almost anybody else. I mean, the classic person is Baba Wawa, Walters and Barbara Walters, where she would be driving the conversation and she would be asking her points. I mean, like you said, I'm not trying to nail you. I'm not trying to make news. That's somebody completely different. So my goal is to make someone feel comfortable enough that they'll tell the stories they would not normally tell. And this happens almost every podcast. They say, wow, I can't believe I talked about that. It's not illegal if it's something that's really bad, although I've never cut anything. One time I cut one thing because the guy made an inaccuracy and he was uptight about it. But I don't. So this is who I am in real life anyway. I love hearing people's stories. Unfortunately, unlike this, as I said up front, doesn't tend to be reciprocal. People don't ask me, okay? But I love hearing it. So when doing the podcast, at first I used to do it to a time. And then I had Dean of Jan and Dean, legendary surf songs, car songs, whatever. And I know Dean, but he started talking and I realized he was giving me brief answers because although he's, old, he's done 1 million fucking interviews and he knows what the interviewers want. He goes, well, you don't want to know about that. I said, yeah, I do want to know about that. And then he starts talking. How he met Brian Wilson, stories I'd never heard anywhere. So with some of these legendary people, like I'm doing Ken Cragen's going live tomorrow, you realize you are getting the history that no one else ever got. That's not my intention. But I said, I'm not going to cut this off. Somebody 78 or 82, when else are they going to have it? And then there are other, as I say, you wait. I mean, occasionally you talk to a famous person and they're starting to give you the canned stuff and you try to get off of that as much as you can. But your other point is well taken. Everybody I do interview, I'm familiar with.
There's an interesting thing about interviewing famous people. They're used to being interviewed. It's hard to interview someone that's used to being interviewed that does it constantly. And to a point where you don't want it to be the same interview they've given 10 other times or 30 other times. You want to ask them something that's fresh and interesting, and not just interesting to the audience, but interesting to them. So it's a different challenge opposed to interviewing somebody from the industry where it's probably the first time that everyone else in the room has heard them speak at length. But when you're interviewing someone that's famous, which you've gotten to do a number of times, that's a different challenge. Those people, hard to get them into the interview.
Well, as I say, they have their boilerplate. A lot of it's self-promotional.
Like a politician.
And as I say, I don't want to make them feel uncomfortable. So don't interrupt them while they're talking. But when they wind down, I try to go to a very small point of something they made or to change the subject because everyone's heard the boilerplate.
Do you consider yourself an influencer?
Well, let's be very clear. What an influencer is considered today, the word has been taken over by this online.
I don't mean an Instagram influencer.
Because whenever I say that, I've written to people that they think that.
Yes, that's not what I meant by the...
I understand. I just want to be clear. I absolutely consider myself an influencer.
Okay, so do you take it seriously when you recommend a book? You read something...
You have no idea how much shit I read and watch and talk about that I won't write about because I will only write about something either if it's ultra important, which rarely happens, or if I think it's going to resonate with the audience. It's like I read this new Richard Russo book, and there were a lot of enjoyable things, but I said, the book is not good enough for people to want to read about it. Then I watched this 70-episode French show about a village during the Second World War. I said, we watched all 70 episodes. But I don't think people are going to want to watch those 70 episodes where I'm watching
a commitment as a full series.
No, because what it is in the whole thing. I'm watching a cop show from France. Now it's also 70 episodes. We only have like 5 or 6 left. And what I realize, this happens a lot. Since I've been watching 70 episodes, at one point I wanted to write about it during like the second season. There have been 6 seasons. But I said, well, I don't know how the rest of them are going to be. And then you had to say, only write on inspiration. So I don't say, well, it's Tuesday. What am I watching? What am I reading? And of course, you run through your entire life. There's 2 types of writing. When you have an experience, when you leave the front door, you have no idea what's going to happen, even though we tend to live behind screens. And you go to a show and wow, you're having a whole experience and there's something to say. The other thing is when you get so deep that you're reading, you get in the mood. I have something to say about this. I mean, like Taylor Swift is a very difficult subject for me because she wrote a song about me. So I'll weigh in like once on a Taylor Swift album, but don't want to weigh in content because I don't want to look like I'm sour grapes. But I'm sitting on the toilet, you wake up, you can't get off the phone, you go through your email, trying to find out what's going on. And I'm checking the Spotify top 50. And I notice that her song is number 28. And like first of the top 15, like 12 are Post Malone, and Post Malone's single was bigger. And all of a sudden I got an idea what this means. I had to run to the computer. Okay. That's the type of thing that touches me off when I'm at home. Or if I can stay at home long enough and surf the net, something always comes up. Right now, I'm way too busy. I'm not complaining about it, but like those days of sitting in front of the computer, playing your favorite tracks, reading if you are, and all of a sudden something comes to you, not as often.
So go back to Taylor for a second, because I wasn't going to ask you, but since you brought it up, it was a huge thing in the industry, but the fact that she wrote a hit song based on you, like the influence that you had that got to a celebrity at that level, and it made such an impact on social media and the craze of the moment at that moment, that song is huge. It'll be connected to her forever and to you. Isn't there something flattering about that?
Not at first. I'll tell you, because what had happened was the day the track came out in advance of the album, I was sitting in front of my computer, and all of a sudden my email starts blowing up from all these news organizations. And they say, we want your take on the track. And if that was still in the time, I said, I'm not paying for the track. Just release that day. I'm not calling Monty, or Big Machine. Let me just steal the track, see what's going on. And I said to myself, before I place it, there is no way that she wrote a song about it. I'm just not a big enough person. And then you start, then all of a sudden I got the tracklist lyrics. There's certain things that only we had discussed in that. And then in the CD lyric booklet on my song, in every song, she picked out letters from each line to send a message. And mine said, I thought you got me. And we'd been on the phone, and she'd also send me a letter and said, oh, you really get me. You really get me. So at first it's creepy because there are a lot of rules of being online. One is you don't respond. You only look bad, okay? Or maybe you say something once. It's like, no, you don't want to be involved in this. And to this day, I get people on Twitter every day, about that song. It's just amazing. But then, as you'll remember, she wrote the song Dear John on the album after that, I think, or whatever. And when Mayer was putting out a new album, he went on record that he felt humiliated. And then I realized that's kind of how I feel. I'm not John Mayer, but I can't clap back. I mean, she's reaching a zillion more people than I do. People I know are in the industry. If I say anything, I'm going to look like sour grapes. But once it hit like 4 or 5 years later, and, like they called me from the New Yorker, and people, don't even know what I do. Say, hey, I saw your name in the New Yorker. Hey, I mean, I must admit something interesting about it now.
All right. Have you seen the series Roadies?
Okay.
You know where I'm going with this, right?
I know exactly where you're going, so I'm trying to think of how to answer. Okay, I'll answer directly. I was at the Hollywood Bowl with our friends Steve Martin and Andy Summers for Brian Wilson. It's 6:00 at night. My phone starts blowing up, because it hit the East Coast. People with roadies. I'd watched the first episode, and I had no idea what they're talking about, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then it just goes insane by the next day. So I do a little research, and the character is obviously based on me, the pastrami sandwich, etc. In addition, Cameron started an online newsletter. I forget the name of the character. It would come to me. I'd like to forget it. And literally where he imitated me, just like my newsletter. I felt this was a really low blow because I've only been nice to Cameron. He sent me his Pearl Jam movie. I sent him he had that stiff movie about Hawaii. I sent him a note. The critics savaged him. I sent him a note. Hey, don't worry about it, blah, blah, blah. Why the fuck is he doing this? Now, one weird thing had happened I'd seen him at Glenn Fry's memorial, which was an amazing event that Irving didn't want me to write about. But at the end, I'm with Salters, the PR guy, and Cameron Crowe. They all go way back. And Cameron's talking about the show. This is January or February. The show didn't, premiere until the end of the spring. Salters says, hey, why don't you put Bob in the movie, in your show? Okay. And Cameron kind of weasels. Okay. I don't need to be this. I said, no, don't worry about it. But obviously he'd already, worked on that. So I just avoided him and then went to a show at the Forum. Maybe it was Fleetwood Mac. And he said, as we were passing each other, because I'm not going to talk to him, said, we need to talk. I said, okay. When the show's over, we're there in the hall, in the back at the Forum. And he starts telling him a story. And I give him a piece of my mind. I say exactly what I told you. Cameron, I don't get it. I've only been nice to you. Why did you do this? I didn't watch the episode. I said, fuck him. I don't need to have this embedded in my brain. but I certainly read enough about it. People certainly emailed me enough about it. I mean, I know the whole story. So he starts, he just like apologizes in general. Well, if it hurt you, whatever, blah, blah. And I said, the online news, he goes, I'll take it down. I said, you don't have to take it down, even though it's already been a year, blah, 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 blah. And then I'm not histrionic, but this is now the moment I've been thinking about. And I said, Cameron, why? Okay. Didn't even say it that emphatically because I was kind of laughing. Then he said, I was on deadline and you wrote something and it pissed me off. I said, okay, Cameron, I get it. And I said, fine. I understand where you're coming from. I totally let you off the hook and we're fine at this particular point. But I thought it was passive aggressive. Yes.
There's something kind of, I don't know, high praise though, that a guy of that level writing something about our industry focused on you for an entire episode though?
Sure.
Doesn't seem like you thought about it that way.
Well, this goes back to your initial question, where I view myself. If I write about anybody in the world doing anything, they read it. And the problem is today in the cacophonous world, people have so many messages that it's hard to raise your profile. This is just like with acts, they can be big selling out theaters and most people have no idea who they are. Most people don't even know the songs that are number one on Spotify. So as my goal, you say about influence, okay? My influence is not to tell, yes, occasionally I say, you got to check this out. This was great. Absolutely. My influence is not to talk down to people, although sometimes I like to scare people straight, but it's to point out all the horse shit and bullshit that people are laying on them to tell them the truth. I don't want to make it about me. I want to make it, that may happen as a result. But pointing out, I said, everything that everybody's telling you is just fucking horse shit. And this is the way it is. Or this, in all these areas. That's what gets me off. And I would like to have that message spread as far as possible. It's more difficult now. But yeah, you have these points of recognition. Certainly, when you do the kind of thing I'm doing, you're in your head a certain amount. And you're always pushing the rock up the hill. So when you're at the bottom of the hill, you say, we can try to remind yourself, well, and he said, well, that happened. Will it ever happen again?
You've got a way about your mailbag that's really interesting. I don't think I would ever do this. There's just no way. But you not only put out what the good stuff is or the mediocre stuff, you send back the criticism, no matter how harsh they're being, particularly towards you.
The mailbag started by accident, okay, in that I wrote something about Toto, specific song, not one of the biggest hits. And I immediately heard from Steve Lukather. He's gotten so much shit about Toto that he's got a thin skin about it. And I said, it was a compliment. Okay, whatever. But he said something that everybody reacted to. Since it was Lukather, I decided to print. This was interesting. This is like probably 2001. Okay. Then the Who played the Super Bowl. I don't know exactly when that was, maybe 2008, 2009.
Yeah, it's been a minute.
And I wrote something on my BlackBerry and sent it. And a great percentage of the comments that came back were personal digs. It's one thing if you disagree with me and you say, you liked it, I think it sucks. It's another thing, if it sucks because you look the way you do, you act the way it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. So with mailbags, it's very touchy at this point in time because you don't want to encourage those people. There is a guy who emails me on every article at least once to give me shit. Every time. For years. Okay? There are other right-wingers. You say anything, positive, negative about Trump, whatever, they're emailing you. So you don't want to encourage those people. I mean, some of those people, I look at the email. Well, this guy emails to give me shit every day.
I can't imagine that holds a ton of credibility with you.
Let's be very clear. You read all this shit. The only way you know what's going on is reading the email. And you have to tell you sometimes not representative, and certain people will email and certain people won't. But it affects you. I mean, okay, I'm trying to deal with this. You're seeing this in entertainment. There was a big story in the New Yorker this week about, as a result of Comic-Con and online reactions, people are literally changing plots of movies and TV shows. What you want to do is you want to do your best not to do that. I'm writing and all of a sudden I'll see something. This is a hot point. They're going to come out. And for a while there, I would then qualify it. I said, don't email me. I know what you're going to say, but this is what I say. Now I don't do that because I was changing what I was doing. Listen, interacting with the public, I household name, biggest people in the music business. I got one of them on Twitter. Okay. This is 2010. So early in the days of this. He started blocking people and all this other stuff. You can't do that because the average person is not used to what this, all this shit. You're in the public eye now more than ever, even a little guy like me is. You're bombarded 24/7 with people telling you you're an asshole, you're a jerk, your opinions are wrong, and they'll get into a lot. They'll get into your physicality, as I say. They'll talk about your girlfriend, your love life. It's all there. So now, for the last 9 months, whatever, trying to reject that and just do. But I wrote something the other day. Okay, I'm writing about the prowess of Nancy Wilson as a guitarist, and I say, no matter how I write this, I'm going to hear from a woman, if not more women, saying that I'm being sexist. Email comes right in, just like, clockwork. Of course it comes. So it's weird. You can see that. So you're writing, but the key is to just write it anyway. These are things I must admit that I think I'm ahead of most people who are writing in general. It's like the 2016 election. The New York Times had a meter on the front saying there's no way Trump can win. And then they were shocked when they won. Okay, the New York Times, the people on the opinion page, like Paul Krugman, they get a lot of reaction. The other people, no one knows who they are. I write something. I was hearing from these people every day. It wasn't a surprise to me. So by having a face, I'm actually ahead of a lot of these people. In addition, I'm in a hip world, like music, which is right up to the minute. Where these people living in New York, it's like the 2020 election. This is one of my big problems with the Democrats. Now they think it's 2016. They're fighting. No, it's evolved since 2016. Now it's 2020. But you're not interacting with enough people to really know what's going on. Whereas I get the pulse I'm trying to divine the pulse and then tell people about it.
Do you scrub that list of what you send in mail list at all, or is it just everybody that responds when you send that out?
I will admit, and I hate to admit it, starting about 18 months ago, the people who are really vicious and heinous, I spam filter them out. There's only 3 of those people now, but 3 of those, and one guy is email against it. This guy, maybe it's time. Because I used to see it as reading the negative stuff, to create more layers of armor. Then I realized these people are just out literally to they want to drag me down in the hole they're in, as Bob Dylan would say.
Now, I want to ask you about what you decide to write on. And I know that you started off by saying whenever anybody calls, there's always an ask. And I've prided myself in never asking you for anything besides, ironically, the interview we're doing right now. But what's your process on deciding what you're going to write?
As I say, almost never premeditated. It's literally some stimulation that I'll read. I mean, it's like, I'm not going to write about this, but give you an idea. There's a story about corn in today's LA Times, okay? And the show was 2 weeks ago. Okay, did they have an empty hole in the LA Times? How did this story get in there? Where is new metal? Something is percolating in my brain. Just like the same type, whenever they release something new, they hype it in the paper. Like for a weekend, last weekend, everybody was talking about the Linda Ronstadt movie. I'd seen the movie. I saw 2/3 of the movie. I thought it was shitty. There were good elements, but they missed the essence. Okay. This is another dangerous topic. And I got into it with some woman, get into it is too strong. It's a friend of mine. Linda Ronstadt was a sexual icon, #1 in rock music from 70 to 80, if not longer. What was it like to be that person? Everybody who lived through that era knows it. It's not in the movie. Okay? So, in addition, it didn't go deep enough for the fan. I don't want to make this about the Linda Ronstadt movie, but things touch you off. And sometimes it's a cumulative thing and something, the tip of the iceberg goes. Okay? But mostly it's from reading and stimulation. As I say, the more time I have where I'm not running around and working at other shit, it's more about the ethereal stuff. But, I could go on and on. I'm inspired usually late at night. I'm a late night person. But if you write the way I do it, you can't sleep for hours. So what if I have to get up early? I'm not that early a guy, but what if I have to get up early? And is the article worth it? I used to pride myself. I was always the first person. I would go to the gig and I'd write immediately. No, you wouldn't be able to read it. Now the whole landscape has changed anyway. Most people don't read the LA Times. I mean, I live in Los Angeles. I don't have a subscription. And they're like 2 days late, so I'm still ahead of them anyway. So, we're really actually getting into some of the realistic stuff. If I am driven to the keyboard, and this happened just last week, I don't care what time it is, what's going on, I'm going to do it. And I'm also always, okay, now I'm revealing all this shit I probably shouldn't. Not that it's that heavy. I don't want to be one of those people at the end of the day who did the same thing over and over again and just have their stories. Like these people, these trade publications, the only thing that changes is the names. So you want to catch the zeitgeist and move with it. You don't want to be stuck at where it once was. Okay. To me, the story, once again, about Taylor Swift is not how much money she took out of the tour last time, a stadium tour, is whether she could sell those tickets again. It's not even, it's not about Taylor Swift particularly. So after you play a stadium, take the money out of the market. They charge high prices. Did that alienate people? Is it hit dependent? Those things are interesting to me, and they transfer to everything else. Okay. Once again, the way Taylor Swift played the media and played things to try to have a girl squad, those are interesting things. You know, I'm just talking about her, but Kim and Kanye and all these people. It's like when someone, you know, gets an award and says, I thank God. I was like, oh, shut the fuck up. Okay. When someone says something different, you know, it's really enlightening. Or when someone plays and leaves the mistakes in. I'm not going to say I'm going to, but these are as my shrink said, sometimes you change 1%, one little thing and the whole picture changes. I was talking to Irving about one of his big acts. He was saying, well, the person in the act thought the sound wasn't perfect because there was a mix with, he was mixed in with the mic for somebody else. And I'd heard that, but believe me, I thought no one had heard it. It'd only been like a small part of the show. And Irving said, that's what makes the act, that little tiny thing. So if you're working on the art level, you're trying to walk that line. Let me be clear. I get inspired and I write, and I can see when I'm missing right there. I see, okay, this is where it's no longer an 11. And I finish everything because you never know what people react to. Almost always, if I'm rawly inspired, it always turns out great. Then there's a level just below that. We go, holy fuck, this is incredible. And then it sucks because you're real, you know, it's incredible. I mean, I've been doing it so long. I know what the game is, but you're starting fresh every day. I mean, it's not like, okay. And there are a lot of things that don't work anymore. I mean, when I first started and I was writing about the classic rock records, people were, but it's 20 years later. I mean, I still write occasionally about them. That's not ringing, you know. Then I would talk about grosses, but a lot of this stuff has changed. You say, well, rather than repeat yourself, what is the next thing that's going to work?
You know, it's funny. You'd mentioned, and I didn't realize that you read the letters twice before you sent them out, at least. There are days where you send 3 or 4 letters out, and then there are days you don't see anything for a while. So if you're rereading things that many times, are you thinking about when you're sending the stuff out, or is it when it's done, it's going?
I write it. I reread it twice. How long does that take? If it's a super long article, maybe that takes 20 minutes. If it's a short article, that
okay, so you're not writing it, letting it sit. You're writing it, rereading it, rereading it.
I learned that fucks it up. I used to do it that way when it was in print, but I don't do it that way anymore.
So when you hit send, you've just written it, you've read it twice for mistakes, and then
it's fresh off the press. I mean, really. Are there sometimes when you hit send and go, I don't know, either because you think this wasn't that good or you're going to touch a button. But your instincts are always right. And this is why this is probably why you're a good concert promoter. You didn't go to work for somebody else. You just did it yourself. And probably everybody told you you were crazy, but you learned all those lessons to make it what you are. Whereas if you're part of the structure, you learn how everybody else does it.
Interesting insight, the way you see things. And I appreciate you making time and talking to me. This was a ball. I've been looking forward to this for a while.
Well, as I said, we could go on for hours. I don't want to chew up all your time. As I say, I'm thrilled you're asking because most people tend not to ask. All these rabbit holes, we could go much deeper. But in terms of some high points, a lot of high points and some depth, I think we covered it.
I appreciate it. Bob Lefsetz on Promoter 101.
Always great to be with you, Steiny.
This interview was such a serious career highlight for me. I have so much respect for Bob. And the way he opened up, held nothing back. Such an honor to have him here on Promoter 101. Thank you, Bob.
Still to come on the Promoter 101 Masterclass sessions.
Hey, this is Bill Silva from Bill Silva Entertainment.
Only on Promoter 101
Masterclass.
Hi, my name is Toby Leighton-Pope. I work for AG Presents in the UK, and I'm on Promoter 101.
This week's quote of the week comes to us again from Jackson Browne. Don't confront me with my failures. I had not forgotten them. I love Jackson Browne. That's some deep shit right there, Luke.
What is that song from?
I think it's just a quote. It might be a song. Who knows?
No, it's a lyric for sure. It's a good one, though, Dan. It's going to bug me all day as to what it is, and maybe a listener will tune in and tell me that I need to listen to more Jackson Browne.
Well, it's probably from Rosie. You know what that song's about, don't you?
I do know what that song is about, Dan.
That's me smiling.
Yo, this is Tommy Lee. Yeah, that T Lee. And you're listening to Promoter 101. Fucking turn this shit up, bitches.
That'll do it. Thank you so much for tuning in to episode 198 of Promoter 101. And thank you so much to our guest today, all the way from the UK, Senbla's Ollie Rosenblatt, and music critic Bob Lefsetz. Quite the interview, quite the get. Glad to finally have him on this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you liked what you heard today, keep in touch with us. Hit us with your thoughts and questions at steiny@promoter101.net.
Hey, we'll return this Thursday at 5 p.m., 8 p.m. Eastern, and that is midnight Greenwich Mean Time, or as we've been calling it here on Greenwich Queen Time. And that could be the Queen Mom, and then we could just say, call your mom. So there you go.
Call your mom. Join us on Thursday. The greats just keep coming at you. We're going to have the iconic Hollywood Bowl in Southern California concert promoter and talent manager Bill Silva. He's going to open up his home in the Hollywood Hills for a very special interview as Steiny interviews one of his closest mentors from the last 30 years.
Cannot wait for that. Literally. Waiting 30 years for this moment. It's going to be awesome. Until then, hey, we're wishing you sold out shows for the week to come.
Cheers. Call your mom.
Hi, this is Steve Martin, not the actor, not the PR guy, the agent from APA. I'll be on Promoter 101 podcast.
Ba-da-ba-ba, ba-da.